generate this one.
Broadcasting will begin in 60 seconds. We come out.
Yeah, I'll hold. Meat guy dropped 50 pounds of pork within order. A line cook, no show. This catering job...
First of all, as John Kerry said, Iran was not going to have such a big stockpile. When President Trump withdrew, while Iran was in full compliance with the deal, Iranians also minimized their commitment within the JCPOA and tried to increase the level and capacity of the nuclear program as a bargaining chip.
Okay, so let me stop you there because I understand what you're saying as a bargaining chip. But clearly, they misjudged, they misread the rules. They misread Israel after October 7th, they misread Trump, and this bargaining chip clearly backfired against them. So the real question is, if they want to get back to a table, are they going to, as Kerry suggested, remove, I'm extrapolating, remove this commitment to the destruction of Israel and actually go to some consortium which you, I think, were involved with, which involves basically threading the enrichment needle, what they need for a nuclear program that's civilian, but off formal Iranian territory. Is that going to be what they might do?
First of all, Christian, I really don't know what would be the final position of Iranian government because I'm not in the government, but I also believe I have written for 2 years that there is a need for ceasefire between Iran and Israel, and Iran and Israel, they should go back to the UN Charter and respect the UN Charter, not to threaten each other. Therefore, this should be, I think, a principle that Iran and Israel, none of them, they should threaten each other. They should respect the UN Charter. The second is about the nuclear deal, about the stockpile. I heard Arakchi told Steve Witkoff during the first 3 rounds of negotiations that if there is a deal, Iran would be ready to export or to dilute the 400 kilogram of stockpile. Therefore, there would be no worry about Iran to make 10 nuclear bomb. And finally, the concern is about whether Iranian enrichment would be military enrichment or civilian enrichment. If they enrich below 5%, definitely this is civilian. And in mid-term and long-term, as you said, and I have already written, there could be a regional consortium between Iran, Saudi Arabia, Emirates, Qatar, and other countries, supervised by International Atomic Energy Agency, like European Urenco Consortium. This would be multilateral, supervised by international community.
The last thing then is, because you're a former nuclear negotiator, I asked the Deputy Foreign Minister, Mr. Ravanchi, before the US entered this war, whether if the regime survives, because you have said, you think the Israeli position is regime change, that they would go in secret and actually take a decision to make a bomb because of what's happened. And he said, no, never, we never have, we never will, etc. Do you think they might, if this doesn't get back to a negotiating table? Is that an option like North Korea that's left on the table?
I think, Christian, it depends to the end state of the current situation. If the U.S. and Israel would stop attacking Iran, Iran will stop. If the U.S. comes back to the negotiation table, Iran would come. If the U.S. would respect international rules, laws, regulations, which is NPT, Iran would be ready to make a deal and accept the highest level of transparency, open nuclear program, and then go to consortium. But if the objective is regime change and they are using the nuclear just as an instrument to bring this country to a total collapse, I think Iranians ultimately would go for nuclear bomb.
Oof, gosh. All right, well, we've been warned. Sayed Hossein Mousavian, thank you very much indeed. Now, let us get more on the Iranian missiles that were fired at U.S. bases, or a base, we don't know, with Becky Anderson. She's been following these developments from Abu Dhabi. So what's the latest on the impact that these missiles had?
Yeah, well, we have got a statement from Qatar, and let me just read this to you, Christian. The missiles were fired at the Al Udeid Air Base by the IRGC. Qatar consider that a flagrant violation of the state of Qatar's sovereignty and airspace. The one you're seeing on your screen at the moment is actually the Defense Ministry statement. That's a second statement. The one I'm reading to you is from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. This is a flagrant violation of the state of Qatar's sovereignty and airspace, as well as of international law. We affirm the state of Qatar reserves the right to respond directly in a manner proportional to the nature and scale of this blatant aggression and in accordance with international law. We also affirm that the continuation of such escalating military actions will undermine security and stability in the region and drag it into situations that will have disastrous repercussions. We know that there were 10 missiles fired at the Al Udeid Air Base, and let's remind,
Pulled out. President Trump, in his first term, pulled out of that deal. So this is what we're getting from a former nuclear negotiator who basically said about the negotiations that then were interrupted by Israel's first bombing round about 10 days ago. So this negotiator says that they had agreed, both the Iranians and Stephen Witkoff, the special envoy, on a draft. And then they were meant to go to another round on the Wednesday, and then further rounds on that weekend, which they then didn't. The United States, he says, canceled the Wednesday meeting, and Witkoff changed its position to zero enrichment. As you know, there's been shifting U.S. positions. Trump at first said they could have some, they can't have a bomb ever, like everybody says. But then it changed radically. And they met for another round. Witkoff stayed very shortly, left the meeting, and then they agreed to meet on the Sunday. And as we all know, what happened. So, what changed was the administration decision not to let any enrichment on Iranian soil. So then tell me about how you get back to diplomacy when the Iranians believe that this was a deception just to allow Israel to attack, and then obviously the US decided to join. And then apparently they were going to talk about this consortium thing about having enrichment off site, so to speak, to thread that needle.
Right.
So to me, it looks like there was a missed opportunity at diplomacy. I don't know what it looks like to you.
Well, I don't know all of the details. I mean, you've certainly got some reporting there. I can't vouch for
Right.
it. I'm not being negative about it. I just don't know if that's the way it unfolded. What I do know is been seeking to bomb Iran. And he came to the Obama administration and asked. He subsequently tried to persuade other presidents. And it didn't, until now, become a reality. So what changed in that is something I'm not going to speculate publicly about it, but something obviously did change. But again, let's come back to the reality of where we are, Christian. We don't want this to be a wider war. The whole region doesn't want that. The world doesn't want that. It's the last thing we need. And the issue is, what's the off-ramp now that we have, in fact, bombed? And that off-ramp is going to take a considerable amount of diplomatic effort and restraint at this particular moment. If everybody goes whole hog, including Israel and the United States joining together, this is going to be one of the wildest confrontations that we have seen, because it's not going to be one that is controllable. And you have the entire Middle East, you have Russia, China, India, others who will have very strong views about where this started and how it started. This is the danger of having pulled out of the agreement, just pulled out. And the IAEA.
If you want to go for outdoor aerial photography, use this folding drone. It has a high-definition camera. It can capture delicate images, whether it is natural scenery or urban buildings. It can be presented with amazing clarity. Whether you are taking selfies or aerial photography, it can meet your needs. Equipped with a large capacity battery, it meets the needs of long-distance shooting. It can sense the surrounding environment in real time, automatically avoids obstacles. Ensure flight safety. It uses a high-performance brushless motor. It ensures stable shooting. It is easy to carry. It is simply a blessing for people who love taking pictures. Don't miss this limited time offer. Buy it now.
Arlington Nissan has something for you because we never have a shortage of inventory. We have community. Arlington Nissan has something for you because we speak many languages. We have assurance. Arlington Nissan has something for you because we offer complimentary service on all new purchases. Arlington Nissan, selection, community, and assurance. Something for everybody.
He has said that they will not pull out of the NPT. Fear that they would pull out of this, observing role by the NPT, and then go even further dark and further underground. But to your point about the intelligence and this is crucial because it's all those years ago this happened in Iraq, and Trump actually said, in his 2016 campaign, Iraq was a big fat mistake. Those are his quotes, and he accused the government of lying about intelligence. That and as we know, there were no weapons of mass destruction. So he was very clear that he opposed that. Now we're having another debate on the intelligence about weapons of mass destruction, which is, as you've said and the intelligence says, Iran does not have. But here is what Secretary Rubio said on the Sunday morning show when asked about the intelligence, which is also U.S. intelligence. Here's what he said.
Let me follow up on a phrase you just word, weaponization ambitions. Are you saying there that the United States did not see intelligence that the Supreme Leader had ordered weaponization?
That's irrelevant. I think that question being asked in the media, that's an irrelevant question.
No,
they have
that is
everything
the
they need
key
to build
point
a
in
weapon.
U.S. intelligence assessments. You know
no,
that.
No, it's not.
Yes, it was.
No, it's
that
not.
The political decision had not
I know
been
that better
made.
than you know that, and I know that that's not the case.
But I'm asking you whether the order was given.
And the people who say that, it doesn't matter if the order was given. They have everything they need to build nuclear weapons.
I mean, I've got deja vu all over again. This is precisely the argument that was made as a justification for the war in Iraq, which turned out to be a disaster for the United States and for the region. So are you concerned that your successor, Secretary Rubio, believes that any intelligence is irrelevant? This intelligence, anyway.
I think it's a bigger question than that, frankly. The decision, to the best of our knowledge in the intel community, had not been made, but he is absolutely correct. They have the materials they need.
Right.
And there was a rather alarming report by the IAEA to the effect that they had about 60% level of enrichment, and they had increased the level, of their amount of enrichable material available to be able to make a bomb. So, that creates a cause for worry. It doesn't necessarily create a casus belli, as we know, where you automatically go in. You can show at the table, this is what we know, this is what you're doing, and this is how we negotiated with them for...
News 18.
This is the response, or this is the beginning of a response? Because we're now, we just got word there was 10 missiles fired toward Qatar, one in Iraq. Was there an indication that this is part of an ongoing series of strikes, or did they not specify?
Yeah, well, they're not specifying this at this point in time. They're saying that the response has been launched, but it's a really interesting question because we did hear from a senior Iranian official today saying that they wanted to make the United States pay, and that in total they're gearing up for a conflict both with the United States and Israel that could last up to 2 years. Saying that they were prepared for something like that, saying they believed that they had the public backing for something like that as well. So clearly, the Iranians gearing up for what they could believe could be a longer conflict with the United States, an ongoing conflict that could involve military action as well. Whether or not in response to the strikes on the nuclear facilities, this is a one-off or this is something where the Iranians might launch further strikes as well, at this point in time, they're not saying. But I think that they do believe that right now they are situated in a direct military confrontation, not just with Israel, but also with the United States, Anderson.
All right, Fred Plaken, I appreciate that. Of course, it remains to be seen what Iran's military capabilities still are. Israel, several days ago, said that they had eliminated as many as half of the launchers for ballistic missiles that Iran had. Obviously, Iran has a number of shorter-range missiles as well. Remains to be seen what their capabilities really are. Retired U.S. Navy Commander Kirk Lippel joins us now. He was the commanding officer.
Welcome to the program, everyone. I'm Christiane Amanpour in London. Iran has fired 11 missiles in total towards American military bases in Qatar and Iraq. This after it vowed to punish the United States as well as keep up its retaliation against Israel, following this weekend's attacks on Iranian nuclear sites. This is where the US tested its biggest bomb ever, the 30,000-pound mop, several of them on Iran's underground nuclear enrichment facility, Fordow. US bombs and missiles also struck two other sites at Natanz and Isfahan. President Donald Trump is declaring it a huge win, saying he's, quote, obliterated those sites. But now his vice president is clarifying those comments, saying they have probably delayed but not destroyed Iran's capabilities. And furthermore, they are not certain about what's happened to Iran's enriched uranium stockpile. The fast move came as a shock to many, especially Iran, after the president opened a 2-week window to make his decision. Technically, he was within those 2 weeks, but much earlier than anybody thought. So is there any room left for a diplomatic way out of this? And what is the end game? Let's get to all of this with the former U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry, who's joining me now from West Newton, Massachusetts, for an exclusive interview. Secretary Kerry, welcome to the program. And of course, so important to have you. And you negotiated the only diplomatic arms control accord, if you like, with Iran over its nuclear deal. First, I need to ask you about this Iranian response. Clearly, a response was expected. What do you think from what you've heard? And we don't even know whether any have hit their targets yet.
Well, Christiane, thank you. Look, I've just heard about this just like you have. So I have absolutely zero briefing or knowledge of exactly what's unfolding. But clearly, Iran had to respond in some way, and they made it clear that they would, and I think the administration anticipated that. The real question now is, what's the impact? How big is this a serious counter in a warlike way, or is it a message? Is it a sort of message sender? And then people will work in good faith to try to get to the diplomatic table. I mean, what's important to remember here is there's no military solution to this. This can go on and on, get uglier and uglier and more dangerous with greater and greater implications for a global basis. This is very dangerous. My hope is that this is more performative than consequential. And that it will satisfy their need to be able to respond. I think President Trump needs to clearly be very judicious about measuring that and understanding it, and hopefully take the higher ground of getting back to the table for the simple reason that we don't have any visibility anymore. insight or the depth of insight that we had with the nuclear agreement that we put in place. I mean, with the nuclear agreement we put in place, we had huge insight as to what they were doing. We had stopped them from developing in whole sectors. We destroyed their plutonium reactor, which they were weeks away from being able to have bomb material. We were able to have, tens of thousands of centrifuges destroyed. We required them to destroy the core of what existed in Fort L, and they did. They dismantled. They under watchful eyes from the international community. Remember that we brought 5 nations and the United Nations to the table, and we put in place the strongest nuclear agreement that has been agreed to by any countries anywhere in the world since the 1950s or 60s. And so we just need to get to a negotiation in order to be able to really solve this problem.
Okay, so I want to ask you about that, but first I want to ask you one more question about this, because as you said, it was highly telegraphed. Iran has been saying since the U.S. Attack that it would have to respond, and some have called for a big response, some of the hardliners inside Iran. But what the U.S. obviously has experience with this. When Trump ordered the assassination of Qasem Soleimani, the head of the Quds force of the IRGC, it was clearly telegraphed that there would be a response from Iran. And from my memory, it did hit a base, but did not cause the damage and death that it could have caused. And that was what people said was a telegraphed, calibrated, showing face response. Do you think this administration, depending on what is the result of this, do you think him and the people around him would understand that? Or he's promised to retaliate in his speech overnight, Trump, if Iran hits any targets?
Christian, it's impossible for me to speculate as to exactly what's going on in either the president's mind or the national security team. And I just don't want to do that. I do think people have to be realistic here in understanding what the choices are. Iran is a proud nation. One of the things I learned in my negotiations was the level of pride was just enormous. They also have been committed to the destruction of Israel. That's a cultural, almost religious component of their policy, and so it's very, very hard to say what exactly is going to bring them back to the table. But I know this: you cannot bomb away the memory of how to make a bomb. You can't bomb away the knowledge that they have developed. You can't bomb away, the broad array of technicians who've been working on this for years, who will go back to work. That's the mission they're given by the leadership of the country. And one of the dangers here is that the more this goes on in a military way, the more power goes to the worst offenders within Iran, the IRGC. And that's not good for anybody.
Well, just I want you to clarify that, because there's a whole amount of talk now. Even Trump is saying, and I don't know whether he's being egged on by the Prime Minister of Israel or the others who have regime change in their mind. But you have just raised a potential result of regime change, that it's not some happy, clappy democracy overnight. It could be a much harder line, and you've just raised the Revolutionary Guard, and others have as well. Do you fear that is a risk that could happen?
Oh, I think it's an enormous risk. I think it's beyond a risk. It's the greater likelihood, because they're the people with the guns and with the military power. And if you look at Evin prison and the way people have been treated and so forth, we know that these guys haven't been natural good actors in so many ways. I think that what's important here, I mean, none of us who've been involved in this over the years look happily at the choices that Iran has made, feeding the power of Hezbollah, the Houthis, supporting Hamas, and engaging in internal activities that we inherently really find repugnant. but we have to find a way to try to solve a problem. That's what we did with President Obama. You know, we had a lot of choices. We had the mop back then. In fact, this bomb was developed some time ago, back in 1991, and then refined. It hasn't been used since. But the fact is that we have other options available to us. We came, I mean, the model of what happened with the prior agreement is really a significant marker for what needs to happen now. And the Iranians, you know, in fairness here, I mean, I don't like, as I've described, much of the behavior. And I think that what the United States, the military, showed they could do and did the other day is a remarkable operation, and they deserve enormous credit if that's the choice that was made. But that choice has to translate into a diplomatic process, and I don't know if it's possible to restore what was there before. We had massive insight as to what they were doing in their program. Yes, it was very worrisome what the IAEA reported a few days ago. But if we hadn't pulled out of the agreement, and if we hadn't subsequently, you know, taken the positions we've taken with respect to how you negotiate, we could have really come back to a place of reasonable.
Well, then, I want to ask you, this is very...
This has to calm down somehow.
Okay, but about the negotiations and, you know...
Is at the White House. Jeff, what do we know at this point?
Well, Becky, we do know, as you and Jeremy were just discussing there, it is too early to say if it is a de-escalation, but it is clear there has been no, at least verbal response from the president to the attack on the Al Udeid base, and we are more than 2 hours on here. Of course, we do expect some type of a comment at some point, but certainly there is a sense that while all eyes were on that, defense officials are telling us that there were no casualties, perhaps even no injuries there. So there is a sense of a pause, at least for the moment, but there's also a sense of a continued defensiveness from the American president at the actual strike from the weekend and the degree of damage it did to the nuclear program. The president just a short time ago is being defensive in a post on the Truth Social. He's saying the sites that were in Iran were totally destroyed and everyone knows it. Well, the reality is that is not yet clear. In fact, far from it. The bomb damage is not yet in. Of course, that will take some time to go through all of this. He used the word obliterated over the weekend. His own Defense Department officials said severely damaged, at least it's a Fordo. So the White House clearly on the defensive posture on that. But Becky, you just get the sense that there is a deep divide among the president's own supporters about the wisdom of a wider war that would lead me to certainly believe the potential of no response to this. Of course, we will see. Retaliation is something that often does not happen immediately, but you're just getting the sense by no immediate retort from the president that there is a
Lexus of Arlington, priority of Arlington. Hi, I'm Morrison at Lexus of Arlington. We have saved
on the US base, coming as it did, you rightly point out, just 2.5 hours ago, could or should or might be taken as a win by Donald Trump and his administration. That's certainly what one analyst, one expert in the region suggested tonight. Your thought on that?
It certainly could be. And look, Becky, this is a base that the president was actually just on last month when you and I were both in Doha for the president's trip to the Middle East. He went to Al Udeid and he visited with forces there and troops there and stood, in fact, in front of a stealth bomber and gave his remarks there. So that certainly was on the mind of the White House officials who were watching these come in. But the fact that the missiles were intercepted and the fact that it looks like there was no, at least loss of life or injuries because much of the base had been dispersed. You just have a wonder if there will be a sense of de-escalation. Certainly that is what some of his supporters and officials believe. There's also deep questions now, again, about the urgency of the attack in the first place. A House Democratic leader here is saying, look, there's still been no briefings, no congressional briefings, so we are expecting them tomorrow, a classified briefing. But that is still the central question here when you sort of sort out all the other discussions. How successful was the operation on early Sunday morning in Iran, and what is the state of the nuclear program? And that is something that this White House has not talked much about today, Becky.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Jeff, it's always good to have you. Thank you very much indeed. Iran says it is still committed to warm relations with Qatar and its as it targets a U.S. military base in the country. We are following breaking news for you. And Natasha Bertrand is at the Pentagon. What is there telling you, Natasha?
Well, look, I mean, this is not the first time that Iran has hit a U.S. base in the Middle East with ballistic missiles. They did so as well in 2020 in retaliation for the United States assassination of Qasem Soleimani, the head of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. And at the time, you know, the Department of Defense was saying that there were no injuries, there were no casualties of any kind in the immediate aftermath of that attack. Very similar to what they're saying now. But in fact, over 100 U.S. service members at the time did sustain traumatic brain injuries, and there were pretty significant injuries as a result of that attack. And so I think it's important now to look at this Iranian attack on Al Udeid in Qatar in much the same way. It's unclear at this point whether U.S. troops were evacuated from that base prior to this Iranian strike, but of course, U.S. officials were very much expecting that Iran would be doing this, and so they did in fact move aircraft out of that base. That base was essentially emptied of all air assets over the last week because they were anticipating that Iran, either in retaliation for U.S. strikes that we did not yet know about, of course, or in retaliation for the Israeli strikes on Iran, that they were going to hit an American base, or at least try to. And so not only at Al Udeid were assets evacuated, but also ships were evacuated from ports in Bahrain, where the U.S. Navy has a presence. And so the U.S. was clearly ready for this. They were positioning for it, and we have heard that all the missiles were actually intercepted. But still, you know, preliminary assessments from the Department of Defense about no casualties, no injuries at all. I think that we need to be a little bit careful of that given DoD's history, whether there have been injuries or anything serious, or choosing to downplay in the immediate aftermath, because of course the Department of Defense does not want things to escalate any further either. And so we're waiting for more concrete readouts from the region about just where U.S. troops were, if they were evacuated, whether they were sheltering, and of course if there were any other attempted attacks anywhere else in the region. We did hear of one ballistic missile that was headed towards the U.S. base in Iraq, the same base that was hit by Iranian missiles back in 2020. So still awaiting word on whether any U.S. service members were hurt or whether that missile actually struck the base, Becky.
Good to have you, Natasha. Thank you. Natasha Bertrand is at the Pentagon. Well, Colin Clark is policy and research at the Sufan Group. Colin, it's good to have you. First, let's get your assessment, your analysis of what we've seen just in the past. 10 missiles at the US airbase in Qatar.
Thanks for having me. Well, we're hearing a lot of the same terminology used by experts and pundits, escalate to de-escalate, that this attack was a fitting mechanism for the Iranians, that it was highly choreographed. But I think there's a couple of wild cards here that we need to take into account. One is President Trump. He's notoriously unpredictable. He says so himself. And his decision-making process is unorthodox, to say the least. So we're not exactly sure how he's going to want to react to this. The other wild card is the Israelis. Clearly, they have not taken their foot off the gas. They were relentless in attacking targets all over Tehran today. And so that's still very much an open-ended question. Are they pushing for regime change in Iran?
So I just wonder, there's two things here. The use of short to medium-range ballistic missiles. Clearly, Iran still has the capability to launch those, despite the effort to degrade that capability by Israel. So that's one thing. We've been talking tonight about what its arsenal still looks like, and I wonder if you can give us some insight on that, Colin. And then secondly, where does this go next?
Well, look, in terms of the missiles, I think Iran is probably keeping a very close eye on its stockpile, right? And potentially maybe even hoarding some missiles. There's been a lot of threats. There's been a lot of kind of boasting. We haven't seen major follow through on those. In terms of what could happen next, I mean, I had an op-ed in the New York Times just yesterday, which I think was titled, "What Iran Does Next." The first thing I laid out was attacking U.S. region. We've seen that happen. A couple of other possibilities are
Again, Reuters is now saying it's legit. Barak Ravid is reporting it's legit. N12 reporter Yaron Abraham in Israel reports that the Prime Minister Netanyahu told ministers at the end of the cabinet meeting, do not comment on the latest developments until further notice.
Supposedly there's a ceasefire between Israel and Iran. I don't know. We find out.
Thank you so much for your support, by the way. Matt, thank you. Tim747 thinks this is so bizarre and sudden. Out of nowhere after so much chaos for 3 days. He thinks it will not last. Thank you, Walter Beasley. Walter.
A war between the United States and China is no longer a distant possibility. It's becoming a question of when, not if. Both sides are rapidly militarizing, circling each other like giants in the dark. Taiwan is the spark. Semiconductors are the fuel, and global stability is the cost. The world may hope for peace, but behind closed doors, every move points to war. From shifting demographics and collapsing economies to stealth fighters, cyber attacks, and nuclear brinkmanship, this isn't just a rivalry, it's a countdown. So why is a US-China war becoming inevitable? And what terrifying lessons has China already learned from the war in Ukraine? Let's dive in. Ever since Taiwan split from China in the aftermath of World War II, China has used the fact that the island was Chinese territory to claim sovereignty over it. However, during the Cold War, the US initially recognized the government in Taipei.
Joining us now, national reporter at the Washington Post and MSNBC contributor Kara Lenig and vice chair of the Center for International Policy Board of Directors, Joe Cirincione. Joe, I want to ask you about this news that's just coming out of the Iranian parliament right now. They've approved a general plan to suspend cooperation with the IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency.
Well, that could be seen as a step towards their withdrawal from the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. They are a member of the Non-Proliferation Treaty. It bans them from having nuclear weapons. This is the kind of step they would take to move towards the construction of a nuclear bomb.
If that is the case, what is the advice you would give the United States government?
Find an off-ramp quickly. As the IAEA Director General, Rafael Mariano Grossi, told the UN Security Council over the weekend, it looks like Iran has, in fact, moved some of their highly enriched uranium gas out of the facilities that we're in. We know from satellite imagery, we could see trucks moving into some of these facilities before the airstrikes, apparently moving some of this gas. We don't know where it is. The IAEA doesn't know where it is. I see no indication from the administration that they know where it is. And this is the danger. While these strikes have certainly conducted damage to the facilities, as you were just discussing, it doesn't appear that we got the 400 kilograms of 60% of uranium. That gas could be fed back into centrifuges at other sites, unhit sites, perhaps unknown sites. And within 5 days, they could convert that material into the core for one bomb. Within 2 weeks, they might be able to build 10 bombs. They may have already done it. If I were Iran, I would be seriously considering constructing the one weapon that they know can stop the U.S. and Israel from attacking it again. That's the great danger.
So you say that Donald Trump has committed the most basic of strategic blunders. Explain that.
Yeah, the fallacy of the last move. This is the belief that you have a clever, bold, or powerful move that can decide a dispute in your favor. But the enemy gets a vote. And now we're seeing Iran respond to this onslaught, first by Israel, now by the United States. They get moves. Is this a symbolic move? We just don't know. This situation is completely unpredictable. Is it a prelude? Are they probing? Are they looking to see what the response is going to be? Again, we don't know. There are a half dozen or more steps that Iran could take, ranging from closing the Straits of Hormuz to attacks on Israeli or U.S. interests globally, soft targets, businesses, individuals. There are many things that Iran can do. And I should add, Iran can absorb a lot of punishment. This is the largest country in the Middle East. This is a very large country with a sprawling nuclear complex, 92 million people, billions of dollars in reserves. This is not an easy target. They can take a lot of punishment and still not feel that they have to sue for peace. So if I was the President of the United States right now, I'd be looking to build a bridge that Iran might be willing to walk across, some compromise agreement that could end this before it gets worse.
Carol, where is the White House's head right now? And by the White House, I mean Donald Trump. What do we know?
Well, I think you know instinctively, but sources have also been telling the Post that the president feels quite vindicated. You know, he took a very strong, bold step, one of his favorite kind of words, you know, to be strong. And he's not apologetic or regretful about that. I remember hearing John Bolton say that many times, that Donald Trump's greatest and most unpleasant position is to be somewhere where he cannot reverse his decision the next day. And that is the one problematic thing for Donald Trump right now. He can't reverse this decision. Indeed, Iran is in a sort of a incredibly weakened state, having Israel and the United States now basically bombarding it, but it's also in a desperate state. And Iran was extremely successful in at least beginning plots in America to try to kill Donald Trump. Remember, we have twice now in 2024, our national security and our FBI authorities have twice now found plotters in the United States that had a series of individuals they were recruiting to kill Donald Trump. And they eventually got caught before they were able to implement their plans. But soft targets that are not Donald Trump in the United States, very, very plausible.
I wonder if you can tell me anything about, Carol, Donald Trump's decision-making process in deciding to strike Iran. I mean, in the past, he's talked about calling off strikes 10 minutes before they happened. He had to be shown images of children being gassed in Syria before he ordered strikes there during his first administration. And just watching him on Saturday night as he was delivering the address to the nation, alerting us all of the decision to bomb these nuclear sites, there was something strange about his energy.
Yeah, well, what was your word for it? I'd like to hear what you were thinking.
He seemed, I mean, maybe nervous and a little less, just a little less confident than he normally is when he's making those sorts of announcements. A little less sure of himself.
Yeah, well, to refer to his former National Security Advisor, John Bolton, this is a no-take-see kind of situation, right? And so I would be nervous too. But the president also was basically relying on a group of people that are not really loyalists per se, but are hawks. And when he made his decision, he was basing it on the intelligence assessment, for example, of General Carrillo, who commands our forces in the Middle East and Central Command. And he was relying on assessments that were more pessimistic about the possibility of Iran being able to produce bombs really quickly, and a desire to, instead of existing intelligence, including from his own Office of the Directorate of National Intelligence and Tulsi Gabbard, saying they have no plans to create a nuclear bomb at this moment. And he also relied on Benjamin Netanyahu, who said to him, I think actually in a kind of a goading way, remember, they tried to kill you twice. Remember that. And That's pretty personal for Donald Trump, because when he ordered the strike in 2020 that killed the IRCG's leading general, when that happened with Soleimani, the revenge plan for Iran was born.
Joe, how do you get the Iranians back to the negotiating table? I mean, they're talking about, as we were mentioning a moment ago, pulling out of the IAEA. They might have moved their enriched uranium, and maybe they take the lesson from the North Koreans, build a bomb, build it now, and then you have leverage. How do you, under these circumstances, after this attack, how do you get the Iranians back to the negotiating table? And then when you get them there, how do you trust them?
Well, negotiations aren't about trust. They're about deals that you make with your enemies. We don't really negotiate deals with our friends. So what you've got to do is offer them a compromise. I mean, you know, Donald Trump sort of negotiates like a mob boss. He puts a contract in front of somebody and says, I'm going to have your signature or your brains on this piece of paper. And that's the kind of deal he presented to the Iranians. Complete end of their program, no enrichment whatsoever. There's not a politician in Iran that could possibly accept that deal. So you've got to find a compromise, something that talks about the eventual complete elimination of enrichment, but allows it for a certain amount of time, or a suspension of enrichment while you're working out a deal. Compromises are there. We were actually close to a deal before Israel started bombing on June 13th. Remember, Donald Trump said we were fairly close to a good deal. Go back to that process. You convince the Iranians. My fear is that the Iranians are in no mood to bargain right now. You talk about us not trusting them. They don't trust us. Every time they make a deal with the United States, we tear it up. Every time we make what we think are negotiations with them, we walk away from them. So there's a gulf at both sides. Let me just say one other point. Trump himself, very delicate position here. You remember 22 years ago when the Republican administration of George W. Bush went to war with Iraq and also misled the American people about the intelligence, misled the American people about the necessity of that war. They spent a year campaigning to build public support and their global allies to bring them along with this. So we're all involved in the takeoff. It was unpopular, but he still got a lot of support for that. Donald Trump did this overnight. If things start going south with this war, if the Iranian response escalates, he's on very thin ground. That could crumble beneath his feet. He doesn't have the allies with him. He doesn't have the American public with him. There are polls today that show that bubonic plague is more popular than war with Iran. So this is a very fraught moment for everybody involved in this three-sided war.
Yeah, and he has some very loud voices in the world of MAGA that have broken with him on this. I mean, lots of them have tried to inch their way back to Donald Trump, but others have remained very staunchly against this move to attack Iran. So we'll see. Caroline?
All right, this is the most breaking news right here. This from CNN right here. Israel and Iran agreed to ceasefire.
Fareed, as is often the case in our
this is where we at right now.
As you were talking, the president just posted on Truth Social moments ago, a ceasefire has been, quote, fully agreed to by Israel and Iran. There will be a complete and total ceasefire 6 hours from now. Again, this just happened. I don't want to spring this on you. And we're trying to figure out exactly what it means. It's a rather lengthy post on Truth Social. Again, we had been reporting, Clarissa and I were just discussing, that there were warnings about strikes in Tehran. There have been strikes throughout the course of the day. What do you think this means?
Well, it follows exactly what I was saying. Trump is now clearly trying to transition from war maker to peacemaker, and he's used his considerable influence with Bibi Netanyahu. Let's remember the Israelis also did massive damage. I would argue the Israeli strikes were probably more significant in setting back the Iranian program than even the American strikes, because they got to 20 of the top scientists, 20 of the top military officials, degraded almost every facility, destroyed Iran's air defenses. So Israel feels like it can stop. Trump wants to move into a peacemaking role. He wants it to stop. The Iranians obviously have it's only good for them because they have not been able to really respond in any sense to Israel's pummeling attacks because they don't have much capacity. But then the question becomes, what do those negotiations look like? The key stumbling block has been this. President Trump began the negotiations saying Iran could have some enrichment capacity, but it couldn't be the kind that could be weaponized. The Israeli position has been no, zero enrichment under any circumstances. The Iranian position has been we have to have the legal right to enrich, which is our right under the NPT. So that's where you have it. Israel and Iran were at loggerheads. The U.S. had a middle position. About 2 weeks. So the question is, now that he wants to be a peacemaker, is there going to be any give there? Or do the Iranians feel they're so weak, they have no option but to move to concede to the Israeli position? That is going to be the heart of the negotiations once they begin.
Yeah, the incompatible red lines haven't changed to any degree that we are aware of at this point. Fareed, stand by. I want to go straight to Jeff Zeleny over at the White House because, Jeff, we're all just digesting this in real time right now, and it seems there's a couple caveats, a couple elements in this. What do we know about what the president just posted?
Well, what we know is the president clearly is trying to move on very quickly, not only to turn the page, but to try and close the book on this entire 12-week episode. And we're seeing the message right there on Truth Social, which just came out. And Phil, never mind how extraordinary it is to basically explain what the president hopes would be the end of a war in a Truth Social post, rather than having officials actually explain it, or the president himself. Yeah, the question is, several come to mind. One, does the president speak for Iran here? He could certainly speak for Israel, more likely that an endgame would be in sight, as we've been reporting. But it's very much an open question, what he knows that would lead to a ceasefire. But separate of all of this, the same question remained right now tonight as it did before this message was sent out. What about the Iran nuclear program? The president has insisted it was obliterated. The president has insisted that it was wiped away. There is no evidence of that yet. So you just get the sense that President Trump is trying to move on from this very quickly, as he often does on things that are somewhat controversial. This has been controversial among his movement. There's no doubt about that. There's a classified briefing on Capitol Hill tomorrow, many deep questions, both sides of the aisle about this. So the president clearly is trying to put this in the rearview mirror. Well, that would defy history in one respect, but also, again, the question of what is left of Iran's nuclear program. And we simply do not know the answer to that.
Jeff Zeleny for us at the White House, thank you very much. We're going to continue to follow all of this breaking news. Joining us now is Democrat from Illinois, Congressman Mike Quigley. He's on the House Intelligence Committee. Congressman, as we kind of try and understand exactly what the president is laying out here on Truth Social, what's your initial reaction to the potential for a ceasefire that's being announced here?
Oh, look, we always welcome a ceasefire. There's always room for diplomacy. It's also important to understand how we got here. The hopes is that they continue to move toward a negotiated agreement here. But that agreement sounds a heck of a lot like the JCPOA, right? The deal that Iran was in compliance with years ago. They weren't creating material necessary for a bomb, and President Trump pulled us out of that deal. And so Iran went forward developing that material, creating a threat, which he now has to go bring us to a brinksmanship form, totally unnecessary.
The administration was scheduled to conduct an all-member House briefing on their intelligence, where things stood in the operation from the weekend. There were a lot of questions, not just Democrats, Republicans had as well, going into that briefing. What did you learn?
Well, look, all we can talk about is the fact that those threats are there. The fact of the matter is Iran is one of the largest state sponsors of terrorism, and that this attack created a very real risk for our allies and the United States at home. and obviously great concerns for our 40,000 troops throughout the Middle East and those bases there. And look, as your reporting just talked about, it's going to take some time before we know where the Iran nuclear program is. I'll say this. It's extremely complicated. They're very difficult targets. And what we're talking about here is extremely mobile. So I think it's beyond the realm of normal optimism to think that the system, the process, and where they're going has been obliterated. There are still very real concerns, but we're going to learn a lot more in the coming days and weeks.
And again, I'm very aware there are very significant limits to what you can say coming out of a briefing like the one you were just in. But it seems to me what you're saying is the president's contention that the program was destroyed, obliterated, no longer exists, does not track with your understanding of things after this briefing.
I'd rather put it in a more general way. I've been on the committee over 8 years, and whenever there's an attack like this, it takes a long time to fully assess what has taken place, what the actual results are. The fact of the matter is, it's an area that we're denied, and we.
Genital self-esteem. And if I'm being honest, I'd never heard of it. How do we increase our...
All right, come on.
During Sunday service. Churchgoers at Cross Point Community Church seen ducking behind chairs and running out of the room for their lives. Suspect Brian Anthony Browning was shot dead when church employees returned fire. Bullets were fired into the church, but no one was injured, thankfully. Police say Browning attended the church with his mother and may have been suffering a mental health crisis. In a search of his home, police say they found even more weapons and a large amount of ammunition.
President Trump has just weighed in on Iran's attempt at retaliation for U.S. strikes on its nuclear facilities this past weekend. Trump, writing on Truth Social, quote, Iran has officially responded to our obliteration of their nuclear facilities with a very weak response. Gotten it all out of their system, and there will hopefully be no further hate. I want to thank Iran for giving us early notice, which made it possible for no lives to be lost and nobody to be injured. Perhaps Iran can now proceed to peace and harmony in the region, and I will enthusiastically encourage Israel to do the same. Now, here's a look at Iran's response that Trump is now referring to as weak. Iran earlier today launching short and medium-range ballistic missiles toward a heavily fortified U.S. base in Qatar. U.S. officials say there are no reports of injuries or casualties among American troops or Qatari citizens. Now, this could be, in part, because of what President Trump pointed out in his post. Iran actually gave Qatar advance notice before the strikes. A source tells CNN this was intended to minimize casualties and preserve an off-ramp for the conflict. While Iran's thwarted attack today may have been on the lighter end of their retaliatory options, a new bulletin from the Department of Homeland Security warned Iran could try to target U.S. government officials if Iranian leaders believe the, quote, stability or survivability of their regime is at risk. This all follows new Israeli strikes on Iran today aimed at the notorious Evin prison in Tehran, known for housing political prisoners and Iran's military headquarters. CNN has this covered from every single angle. Fred Plakin in Iran, Aaron Burnett in the United Arab Emirates, Jeremy Diamond in Tel Aviv, Israel, and Jeff Zeleny at the White House in Washington, D.C. We want to start things off with CNN's Fred Plakin, who is in Tehran, Iran. Fred, what are you seeing on the ground there today, and what are you hearing from Iranian officials about what may come next?
There
of all, as far as this retaliation is concerned, a couple of hours ago, the Iranians came out with statements saying that they had, in fact, launched a barrage of missiles towards the Al Udeid air base, run, of course, by the United States in Qatar. They said, and this came from a statement from Iran's Supreme National Security Council, that the amount of missiles fired by towards their facilities by the United States, obviously indicating that this could very well have been a tit-for-tat response by the Iranians. The Iranians are calling this a decisive response, a robust response, and they also say that it was successful. The Iranian state media, Phil, is saying that 6 of the missiles came through and hit their target. Obviously impossible for us to independently verify that. Marvin, there were actually celebrations in the streets here in Tehran following that attack by the Iranians. And as far as today is concerned, we did see a lot of anti-aircraft fire coming here over the skies of Tehran this evening. Also, of course, preceding that were those Israeli airstrikes that you were talking about. Some of those airstrikes actually very close to our location. Earlier today, we heard
Fred Blanken, one of the few Western journalists in Tehran, having some issues there with his sound. We are going to keep in touch with him throughout the course of the show. Fred, thank you. Stay safe. I want to turn now to CNN anchor Erin Burnett, who is also in the region. She's in the United Arab Emirates near the Strait of Hormuz, a key strategic waterway in the Middle East. Erin, Iran's attack today is only putting this entire region more on edge, it seems.
Yeah, more on Here at Coat, teamwork saves my managers at least an hour to an hour and a half every single day. What we used to do was everything.
What happened with Iran in the Middle East, and some breaking news coming just now. Joining us this evening, Vice President J.D. Vance. Mr. Vice President, thanks for coming.
Absolutely, thank you.
Just seconds ago, the President went to Truth Social and typed this. It has been fully agreed by and between Israel and Iran that there will be a complete and total ceasefire. Complete and total ceasefire is what he typed.
Yep.
What does that mean? How did it come about? What's the development here?
Well, we were actually working on that just as I left the White House to come over here, so that's good news that the president was able to get that across the finish line. I think what it means, Brett, is quite simple. First of all, the president, without, knock on wood, having a single American casualty, obliterated the Iranian nuclear program. We are now in a place where we weren't a week ago. A week ago, Iran was very close to having a nuclear weapon. Now, Iran is incapable of building a nuclear weapon with the equipment they have because we destroyed it. So that's a very, very big thing. Now, what that means, I think, is we have to talk to Iran and, of course, to Israel about what the future holds. Because while we have obliterated the Iranian nuclear program, our hope and our expectation is that they're not going to try to rebuild that program. And I think that's what the president is really trying to figure out here, is to build a long-term settlement here to where we can have peace in the region, where our regional allies and, of course, the American people, most importantly, can be secured, but where we can ensure that the destruction of the Iranian nuclear program that has already happened is not something they try to rebuild.
I want to get to the obliterated part in just a minute. I get the context here. Congratulations to everyone. It has been fully agreed by and between Israel and Iran that there will be a complete and total ceasefire in approximately 6 hours from now, when Israel and Iran have wound down and completed their in-progress final missions for 12 hours, at which point, the ceasefire for 12 hours, at which point the war will be considered ended. Officially, Iran will start the ceasefire, and upon the hour, Israel will start the ceasefire, and upon the 24th hour, an official end to the 12-day war will be saluted by the world. During each ceasefire, the other side will remain peaceful and respectful on the assumption that everything works as it should, which it will. I would like to congratulate both countries, Israel and Iran, on having the stamina, courage, and intelligence to end what should be called the 12-day war. This is a war that could have gone on for years and destroyed the entire Middle East, but it didn't and never will. God bless Israel. God bless Iran. God bless Iran. God bless the Middle East. God bless the United States of America, and God bless the world. He seems confident that this is all coming together.
That's right.
And when you left the White House, were you thinking this was all gelling here?
When I left the White House, I thought that we might be able to get it across the finish line before this broadcast, and it looks like the president has been able to do that. I mean, look, he's been working the phones constantly. Frankly, before the 12-day war started, but certainly over the past 12 days, the president's been extremely clear about America's national objective here. It is to create a world where Iran cannot build a nuclear weapon. We, of course, destroyed the nuclear program that they had, and the president told the entire team, we're going to work to make sure that they don't try to rebuild that nuclear capability in the future. And it's, look, this is a great thing. For Israel, think about this. They've accomplished an important military objective. They've helped us destroy the Iranian nuclear program. They've also destroyed the conventional missile capability of Iran that threatened the country of Israel. For the Iranians, I think this is a new opportunity to actually pursue the path of peace. As I said yesterday, what the Iranians have showed through their support of terror networks, through their now failed effort to build a nuclear weapon, is that they're just not very good at war. And I think the president the reset button and said, look, let's actually produce long-term peace for the region. That's always been his goal. I actually think when we look back, we will say the 12-day war was an important reset moment for the entire region.
Would you be surprised if Iran is sending out signals that it doesn't have a specific ceasefire plan? How would the communication have been with the Iranians to get this level of confidence to put out that detailed statement?
Well, one of the things I've learned, Brett, about the Iranians in the past, 4 or 5 months that I've been in this job is what they say publicly and privately can sometimes be very different. I think what the Iranians have shown very clearly is they don't want this war to go on for much longer. Their air defenses have been totally destroyed. Their conventional missile program has been largely destroyed. And of course, their nuclear program has been obliterated, as I said before. So I think the Iranians are at a place where they don't want to keep on fighting. You saw the president, and I don't have the truth in front of me, but he talked about the next 6 hours finalizing the attacks. I mean, I think what he's talking about is right now, for the American people watching, it's dark over there. That's typically when the Israelis and the Iranians have been shooting at each other. I think there's some recognition that that might continue for another few hours, and tomorrow really is a new day. The end of the 12-day war, the end of the Iranian nuclear program, and I really do believe the beginning of something very big for peace in the Middle East.
So you said totally obliterated. The president has said totally obliterated the Iran nuclear program.
Yeah.
Do you know for sure where all the highly enriched uranium is?
Well, Brett, I think that's actually not the question before us. The question before us is, can Iran enrich the uranium to a weapons grade level, and can they convert that fuel to a nuclear weapon? And we know, based on the success of our mission, of course, the leadership of the president, but the incredible skill of our military, that the two mission objectives are completely successful. We know that they cannot build a nuclear weapon. Now, you asked about the highly enriched uranium.
Yeah, like 900 pounds of it.
But what we know, Brett, is that uranium is something that exists in very large supply. Our goal was to bury the uranium, and I do think the uranium is buried, but our goal was to eliminate the enrichment and eliminate their ability to convert that enriched fuel into a nuclear weapon. I think this is an important point, Brett, because so many of the folks who have focused on the highly enriched uranium, 60%. The main focus, Brett, has been to destroy their enrichment capacity, because we don't want that 60% uranium to become 90% uranium. That's the real concern, and that's what was so successful about our mission.
So after all this, if the Iranian government survives as is, what's to stop it from rebuilding over time if they in fact moved the 60% highly enriched uranium? That's the concern.
No, the big concern, Brett, and this is again what we destroyed, is their ability to enrich uranium. If they have 60% enriched uranium, but they don't have the ability to enrich it to 90%, and further, they don't have the ability to convert that to a nuclear weapon, that is mission success. That is the obliteration of their nuclear program, which is if Iran is desperate to build a nuclear weapon in the future, they're going to have to deal with a very, very powerful American military again. Our hope is that the lesson that the Iranians have learned here is, look, we can fly a bunker buster bomb from Missouri to Iran completely undetected without landing once on the ground, and we can destroy whatever nuclear capacity you build up. I think that lesson is what's going to teach them not to rebuild their nuclear capacity.
Yesterday, were you speaking on the president's behalf when you said said he was not interested in regime change?
Well, Brett, what I've said is the American military, that is not our mission as regime change. Our mission was to destroy the nuclear facilities and the nuclear program of Iran, which we, of course, did. I think what the president's also said is that the Iranian people want to make a decision about regime change. That's between the Iranian people and the regime. Of course, we support freedom fighters all around the world, but our mission was to destroy the nuclear facilities, and that's what we did.
So you don't think there's any mixed message when he goes to Truth Social and says it's not politically correct to use the term regime change, but if the current Iranian regime is unable to make Iran great again, why wouldn't there be a regime change? Miga.
Well, I think what the president is saying very clearly, Brett, is if the Iranian people want to do something about their own leadership, that's up to the Iranian people. What the American national security interest here is very simple. It's to destroy the nuclear program. That's what we've done. And now that the 12-day war appears to be effectively over, we have an opportunity, I think, to restart a real peace process. And Brett, this is not just about two countries, Iran and Israel. All of these Gulf Arab states, they want peace, they want to invest, they want to build artificial intelligence hardware, they want to sort of come into the new economy, and that was impossible when you had Iran that was, as the president said, acting like a bully across the Middle East. We really think that if the Iranians are smart about the path forward, this could be a new dawn of an economic age of prosperity, of course, for our Gulf Arab allies, for us, for the Israelis, for everybody, but it's going to require the Iranians play it smart from here.
The president called it very weak, the Iran missile firing on the U.S. base in Qatar, El Udeid. Was it a face-saving move? How do you get from that, firing missiles at a U.S. base, to a ceasefire, as he details in this Truth Social?
Well, as the president said, they actually gave us some warning here. And we think they gave us some warning because they didn't want to kill Americans and they didn't want to escalate. There's definitely some symbolism to this, Brett. If you look at the Iranian attack, it was 14 missiles that they telegraphed ahead of time. We dropped 14 bunker buster bombs. As the president told me earlier, our missiles, our bombs were a little bit bigger than their bombs. Our bombs actually accomplished the goal of eliminating their nuclear program. But look, we're happy, again, to restart the peace process as the president just did today.
Was the message delivered directly to the U.S. or through an emissary?
The message is always delivered through some sort of intermediary. That's been consistently true of the Iranians. Of course, we'd love to talk to them. The president's been clear about this. We'd love to have a direct conversation about how we move this thing forward because, again, we got to step back here. Why did the president do what he did over the past week? It's so that we could destroy their nuclear program. If they try to rebuild it, they're going to be on the wrong end of American power once again. We don't want that. I think they don't want that, but the ball's in their hands.
You've been reluctant or at least cautious about getting engaged previously, and that has been public. What made you sign on to this action this time?
Well, I think the president has been very clear, and I've always agreed with the president that Iran can't have a nuclear weapon. And you try to run the diplomatic process as much as you possibly can. When the president decided that wasn't going to work, he took the action that he had to take. Now we're in a new phase. That action was successful. We had a wildly successful military operation to take out their nuclear program. Now let's go on to the next phase. And I think the president, look, sometimes he's willing to use peace. Sometimes he's willing to use the military. I think it really depends on what the Iranians do from here.
And what do you think they do from here?
Well, it's an open question, Brett. I don't want to predict what the other side will do, but I think that I know what we'll do if they continue to pursue a nuclear weapon, and I hope they don't choose that path because I know the president wants to see the Middle East become peaceful and prosperous in the future. That's not going to happen if Iran pursues a nuclear weapon again.
And for the people, so we talked about the people who believe that this is going towards World War III, especially in your own party. There's a section that's very vocal. There's another section that says you should take out this regime because it's evil and horrible and has done horrible things for decades. How do you square those two sides? And can this regime stay in place and still have a peaceful, reaction relationship with the U.S.?
Well, I think the president has squared those two sides quite well. One, because he's the leader of the movement, and a lot of people trust the president as they should. They recognize they're not seeing the same intelligence. They're not seeing the same classified documents. They trust the president to do a good job. But importantly, Brett, I think he's threaded the needle quite well here. We had a very particular objective. It was profound and difficult to accomplish. The elimination of the Iranian nuclear program, and I think the president successfully did that. You're asking, were the Iranians close to a nuclear weapon? Brett, they were very close to a nuclear weapon. And what I encourage my fellow Americans to think about here is that a week ago, the Iranians were quite close to achieving a nuclear weapon. Now, they cannot build a nuclear weapon. That is the biggest testament to the president's leadership and to the success of our mission. In 1 week, without, thank God so far, not losing a single American casualty, we have taken what was a threatening nuclear program that could have destabilized the entire world. Now that program is gone. We did it through effective presidential leadership and also some very, very competent work from our troops.
How often does it happen where you're going to do an interview and you get a Truth Social second sense of it, but it's pretty detailed, where you are being asked about something the president has just put out?
In this administration, Brett, it happens quite a bit, actually, but we knew this was coming. The draft, it was interesting. I just read the draft about 2 minutes before we went on the air. It was a little bit different from what the president had showed me a couple hours ago, but again, I knew that he was working the phones as I was on the way over here, so I knew exactly what we were going to do. And look, I love that about this presidency and this administration, is he's always working. He doesn't say, the vice president's going to do an interview, so I'm going to stop doing anything. He says, we're going to do the American people's business. The vice president knows what I'm trying to accomplish, and if I get it done, great, because we're going to talk about it and celebrate it, because it is a thing to celebrate. I can't emphasize this enough, Brett. We have destroyed the Iranian nuclear program. 0 Americans have died. That's an amazing, amazing thing. Americans, whether Democrats or Republicans, we should be celebrating that.
Mr. Vice President, we appreciate you coming and rolling with the punches as well. Thank you for the time.
Thanks, Brett. Good to see you.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.
As a professional mechanic, your tools are essential for your living. Icon tools complete every repair without giving an inch. With broad selection and industry-leading warranty, you can count on Icon. You can count on great value. With over 1,500 stores and interest-free credit on qualifying purchases, why pay tool truck prices? Go with Icon Tools. Tool truck quality, unbeatable value, only at Harbor Freight.
Most parents never imagined that baby food could be part of the problem, but research has linked heavy metal contamination in popular baby foods to long-term developmental issues, including autism and ADHD. If your child regularly ate these foods and has been diagnosed with autism or ADHD, you're not alone, and it's not your fault. Just Point is helping families understand whether they may qualify for compensation in the baby food lawsuit. There's no cost to find out if you may qualify for compensation. Start by filling out a short form online, and one of our specialists will contact you to learn more about your child's experience. Take the first step. Together we build a safer world by holding those responsible accountable.
And we want to bring in now our Fox News senior strategic analyst, retired 4-star General Jack Keane, joining us now here in the studio. General, that remarkable press conference, the tactics used, the deception, and the fact that we got in flawlessly, struck our targets, as according to Secretary Haig said, it appears we hit every intended target objective, and yet got out without a single shot being fired at us.
Yeah. Well, first of all, we got a congratulations to our troops in that execution, and the complexity of that operation is obvious. And also, let's commend the President of the United States. He showed enormous strategic patience in trying to work this with the Iranians so that they would dismantle their nuclear enterprise. But at the end of the day, we had to help the Israelis dismantle it. That's the facts on the ground. I think the operation had 4 major characteristics of it to help it be successful. One was the operational security of the operation. And that is really tough to maintain in our open, democratic society that we have. And we know that things do have a tendency to leak out.
Everything leaks in Washington.
And then everybody, listen, for the last week or two has been focused on this operation, and yet it didn't leak. The deception helped considerably in that, in terms of the missile. I mean, the planes flying initially west, but the actual planes flew east to the target. I think the president contributed to the deception operation as well when he said, well, I'm going to make a decision in a couple of weeks. The truth of the matter was the decision was already made or made very close to that statement he made. and everybody was thinking there was time here. And then, characteristic of military operations, when we're going after something that we have to destroy, to ensure that we use overwhelming force. And you saw that. Most everyone was saying 2 to 3 of these MOPs were going to be used, 14.
Yeah.
Multiple aircraft to deliver all of those, and then the additional missiles, and taking down 3 targets that the Israelis wanted, not just one. And then the thing that was emphasized is the flawless execution. And I think the audience had a complexity, got a feel for the complexity of military operations. And I really applaud the chairman for providing those details. And I want to tell you, what you folks have been doing here on Fox and Friends Weekend since this got started about 3 or 4 hours ago is really outstanding. Well done.
Well, thank you, General. And having you here is so beneficial because you understand these. And I think the real question, General, is, okay, so what now are the strategic implications of this strike? We obviously didn't get much BDA, battle damage assessment, from the Pentagon briefing. It's going to take some time. We'll learn that. But just initially, what do you see as the strategic implications?
That's a great question. You know, it's pretty significant opportunity, actually. Obviously, the threat of nuclear weapons being used against Israel, the United States, as Iran has threatened, or Europe, which would clearly be in range of their ballistic missiles, that is about off the table. The second thing is, and this is serious, no nuclear arms race in the Middle East as a result of Iran acquiring a nuclear weapon, which would have happened. The Arabs are not going to say this publicly, but they are relieved about what has just happened here. And the other thing is, we are on the cusp of actually ending Iran's malign and aggressive behavior in the region, Griff, that has existed for 45 years. And you have outlined the killing of Americans from 1983 all the way up to the 350 attacks that Iran delivered on U.S. bases in Iraq and Syria during the 4 years of the Biden administration, and not one time did they ever accept General Kurilla's recommendation to strike Iran to stop that from happening. And so the implications here are very serious in terms of the opportunities for peace and stability. Iran is isolated in a way that we've never seen in the 45 years. The proxies have not supported them at all. Think of that. Iran is on its heels. Their very survival is in question as a regime and as a military organization, as the IRGC controlling the proxies and supporting the region. All of that is on the table. None of them have come into their assistance. The Hezbollah was organized principally to defend Iran against an attack from Israel. Billions of dollars spent on them, 150,000 missiles. I've talked to the Israelis and said, what is going on with Hezbollah? Why haven't they fired? Do they have any missiles? Yes. Answer, they have thousands of missiles left. Why haven't they fired? He said, sir, their will is broken.
Wow.
And they can see what is happening to Iran. Why are they going to risk all now? The Israelis will come back at them when they believe Iran is close to being finished. You know, and then the isolate. Where is Russia and China, Griff?
Yeah.
This axis has been formed. Those 4 nations, China, Russia, Iran, North Korea. Where are they? They haven't provided no military assistance to Iran whatsoever. Huge opportunity here to move forward and take advantage of it in terms of peace and stability in the region.
Well, and, you know, you mentioned Russia and China. You know, the Wall Street Journal has an editorial early this morning, Mr. Trump meets the moment, and it's really talking about American deterrence being back. And, you know, you saw the greatest military the world's ever seen on display flawlessly in the last 24 hours. What message does that send? Is America once again a global leader in terms of deterrence?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, when President Trump came back into office, the major geopolitical change that he was coping with is China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea forming an alliance together to cooperate because they saw opportunity. They believed that American leadership was weak, and they could take advantage of that weakness. It's not isolated that Putin went into Ukraine. It's not isolated that Iran operationalizes all of its proxies to once and for all go after Israel and bring that country down. And President Xi is preparing for war, and he keeps threatening war And during those previous 4 years, the intimidation and coercion on his part has accelerated dramatically. This operation by itself, even though it's limited in terms of what we are doing and certainly limited in terms of what our geopolitical objectives here, we're not going to invade Iran, we're not going to occupy it, we're certainly not going to do any nation building. We just want them to stop. And I think we'll achieve that. What a message this sends to our allies and partners around the world, certainly the Arabs in the region, but also Taiwan, the Europeans, etc., watching this. What really are they seeing? They're seeing the President of the United States come to the assistance of a partner and ally who needs our help and who is being challenged in their very existence. And the United States has their back and has stepped up and used force. That is what is being seen. Our adversaries see, and you said it, the return of American global leadership in a way that they can no longer take advantage of like they have been doing for the past 4 years. And they've been getting away with it, and we all have seen it. So this is a step in the right direction. I mean, it's not a fait accompli in that sense, right, but they will change their assessments as a result. I believe when President Trump got elected, they had to rethink what's going to happen here in terms of what we have on the table and what are our objectives. Now they have to make another assessment back on based on the fact that President Trump has used force to eliminate a nuclear threat to Israel, to the region, to the world writ large. Notice as a result of it.
On notice, General, let me ask you really now, as we wait to see if Iran will strike, will they hit one of our bases, al-Assad in Iraq? Will they go after Bahrain? What do you anticipate will be the response?
Arlington Nissan has something for you. We have selection. Arlington Nissan has something for you because we never have a shortage of inventory. We have community. Arlington Nissan has something for you because we speak many languages. We have assurance. Arlington Nissan has something for you because we offer complimentary service on all new purchases. Arlington Nissan, selection, community, and assurance. Something for everybody.
Haven't tried new Parmesan stuffed crust? Sign in or sign up for Domino's Rewards to get one for 50% off.
What will be the response?
We don't know. So it's their choice to make. But I'm confident the message that has been delivered to Iran that we are conducting a limited one-off airstrike in support of Israel's operation. We are not going to war with you. If you retaliate against us and hurt people at our bases or our capabilities at those bases, then you're going to have to deal with massive consequences as a result of that action. I believe based on where Iran is, and they're so much back on their heels, their military leadership has been decapitated, their civilian leadership is in hiding, buried under the ground, and the psychological and emotional impact that would have on that person in terms of what is happening to them and what they're used to having in their normal everyday life will take its toll. I think they will recognize that they cannot afford to do what people are suggesting, a massive strike on the United States, which would result in our significant, overwhelming response. And that would put their regime's survival at risk, not in terms of us bringing down the regime, but in terms of them being so politically weakened as a result of everything they care about being destroyed, that people will look for opportunities to take that regime over.
Well, and obviously we saw Iran responded after we took out Soleimani. So we can expect maybe something will come. But, you know, I'll tell you, General, I spent weeks, months over the last 4 years out in places like the San Diego sector. I encountered English-speaking Iranians, Syrians. My colleague Bill Malusian and I did too. I now am talking to some DHS sources, worrying about, you know, is there a threat of a cell or someone being activated, or even a smaller individualized, motivated person to try and strike us here at home?
Yeah. Has some concerns about that, and obviously Senator Cotton, who's the head of the Senate Intelligence Committee, has mentioned that, so I'm assuming that threat is real. But I also have a lot of confidence in our counterintelligence capability. One, the fact that they're recognizing that threat does exist means that they're onto something. And the fact that they revealed it to the American people was interesting in of itself. So I have confidence in that system. And hopefully that they'll be able to prevent anything like that from happening. I think the more realistic thing that would happen is some kind of missile retaliation by the Iranians.
Yeah, and we probably can expect that. I want to bring you back to that just a little bit because, you know, General, there's so much of discussion in this about, well, there is legitimate questions and concerns of being drawn into something else. And remember what happened to Iraq and in Afghanistan. But it seems to me that the intelligence this time is clear, and it's against an enemy. You're dealing with an enemy who is the undisputed #1 global, terrorist on the globe. And so they've been chanting, as we've pointed out, for 4.5 decades, death to America and killing Americans. But now we have the IAEA intelligence. It came out in the 31 report where, for the first time in 20 years, inspectors in Iran under the non-nuclear proliferation treaty. Remember, JCPOA went away, but the inspectors did say, on their limited knowledge, they say that we had literally enrichment happening up to, well, here's what they say. They say the fact that Iran is the only non-nuclear weapon state in the world that is producing and accumulating uranium enriched to 60% remains a serious concern. For our viewers, 20% is what you need perhaps for energy. 60% is a short distance from the 90% weapons grade. And they end the report this way, General. Unless and until Iran assists the agency in resolving the outstanding issues, the agency will not be in a position to provide assurance that Iran's nuclear program is exclusively peaceful. It seems that that's going to be a part of what woke us up about it.
Well, I think that, and Israel's intelligence as well. I think some of the statements that came out of our intelligence services about they haven't made a decision is absolutely ludicrous. Based on the fact that they also would make that they're 2 weeks from being able to assemble the enough enriched uranium to weaponize it and make it into a weapon. Well, haven't they already made a decision to do that? And so I totally discount the conclusion that a decision hasn't been made, because if they made the decision today, 2 weeks from now, they would have what they wanted. And we wouldn't even notice it. It would be the same thing that happened in North Korea. Going back to the escalation thing, and I know some of your colleagues are concerned about this, when a president is considering what he did here today, and he knows that the enemy has a vote, and that they can come back and escalate as a result of it. And then our leaders walk the president through the options that we have based on size, scale, and impact of the enemy's escalation. And we have options. And we walk him through all of that. And obviously there can be a walk up the escalation ladder, which is the concern that people have. But you have to ask this fundamental question. Obama and Biden were both paralyzed by the fear of adverse consequence, the fear of escalation and what it would imply. And it paralyzed them. This president has not paralyzed him. And the reason is he'll ask the next question when they take him through the escalation. Well, what? Nothing. Take me through what is the impact of doing nothing. And that is what leads you to overcome your fear, which is a natural human experience when you're dealing with these. You're president of the United States, and you have people's lives at risk, literally based on your decision here. But when you ask that question, and you get the response, and the danger it meant to Israel, the danger to the American people writ large, and the danger it meant to the Europeans, our soldiers are in uniform, and we're expecting them to take risks. They have come forward and put their life on the line to defend this country. They are a small population representing the strong values that we have. And we are asking them to accept that risk. Yeah, I'll hold.
Sticking around the table here, I want to start with you, Joey, because on America's Newsroom, we talked about this and what it was like for soldiers to be at an American base waiting for what might be happening. And you said that they were okay because they knew that they would be able to engage if they needed to. And now we have this result.
Yeah,
It's on tape. This is exactly what I thought the immediate response would be. I still worry that there will be either proxy groups or we'll talk about later sleeper cells in this country. There'll be some other way of showing their discontent. But, when President Trump says, when he puts out a statement like that, it makes you think he's got some inside information on what their intent is. Mm-hmm. I love that he said, thanks for giving us that warning. The men and women on these bases, they're football players that just saw the clock go zero for the game to start. They don't want war, but they're ready for it. That's why they're in our military. That's what Pete Hegseth has beat the war drum on ad nauseum. And so I got a text from an Army special operator that said, we're hunkered down. We don't want anything to happen, but at least we know if something does, we can shoot back. Mm-hmm. And man, that's a big turn of the tide. I'll tell you that.
Indeed. Jesse, I don't think people have had the benefit of hearing from you yet since this all went down.
Well, I'm glad they didn't hear from me Saturday night because I was at a party.
Me too.
But so far, so good. These strikes in retaliation look to be telegraphed. They didn't want any American casualties. That would have triggered an overwhelming response.
Yeah.
And they have to show a little something to their own public to show that they're still in charge. So there's no American casualties. There's no escalation at this point, and there's no mission creep at this point, which is great. And now you have an Iranian regime, which is the lead sponsor of terror, without their nuclear scientists, their generals, their air defenses, or much of a nuclear program left. This is a best case scenario. When I saw it happen on Saturday night, I thought it was a righteous strike. Donald Trump gave peace a chance, but the Ayatollah gave him the middle finger, figuratively. He wanted to meet him in Turkey face to face for negotiations, and the Ayatollah said no. So this was the last resort. And it shows the effectiveness of this administration, the precision and the secrecy to be able to pull it off. But also, the prestige of the U.S. military had taken a little bit of a beating. After the Afghanistan withdrawal and all the trans stuff, to come out and do something like this, where they're putting a bomb on the target the size of an air conditioner, it's just an incredible feat. You're seeing our missile defense system knocking out other missiles in the middle of the sky. It's just amazing. And deterrence is back because, Joe Biden, don't. And our enemies did. Barack Obama drawing the red lines. They were meaningless. And China's watching. The cartels are on notice now. And even Denmark probably won't put up much of a fight over Greenland. And even in the trade negotiations, this gives the president a little bit more leverage because it's not like we're going to drop bunker busters on Germany. But when you are willing to go to this extreme for something you believe in, the people that are at the negotiating table are going to take notice. I'm sure Lutnick is going to exploit this. There will be a damage assessment. No one knows the extent of the damage. It looks pretty devastating. You don't know if they squirreled away any enriched uranium and they're just spinning something on the fly now. Nobody knows. And no one knows, as you're right, you could have a revenge attack in a year from now. Nobody knows. But so far, oil prices are down. The market was up. It's contained at this point. So well done.
All right. Harold Ford Jr., the one development today was this attack by the Iranians, which looks, as the president said, weak, and might be the last one, because it's similar to what they did after Soleimani, right? They had a response, but they told all the people in Iran it was an amazing response. We all know that's not true. The people inside don't. But what do you think?
Well, good to be back with everybody. What a weekend. I believe Joey is largely right, if not totally right. Our men and women are ready to go to war. They understand what the implications are. Jesse, you're right. This notion that our military somehow or another had been weakened over the last 6 months to 3 years, a lot of that was refuted. What the military did in terms of demonstrating their capabilities, the choreography did, the planning, and obviously the president himself orchestrating from all press reports an unbelievable deception within deception. Was nothing short of astonishing. We now are at a time we got to figure out how we de-escalate. I think where the president his definition of de-escalation is bringing them to the table to try to ensure that they don't have nuclear weapons, that the capability has been removed. Jesse's right. This damage assessment, I'm curious to hear Joey's assessment of how he thinks we should be thinking about this and how long we should be prepared to wait to understand. In other words, we have to put human assets on the ground to understand if we got all of this or not. I guess we'll learn a lot of this in the coming days. but to Democrats, I know we have a segment on this, who are invested in the process as opposed to the results here, and who are raising issues that we didn't raise when it was a Democrat president. We've gotten to a point where Republicans raise things only when it's Democrats, and Democrats raise things when it's only Republicans. We should be happy. This was an American success. What we defined we wanted to do, the president wanted to do. Now, then I think the thing for me that is most concerning as we sit here today is, are we talking about regime change, or are we satisfied with where we are now and determining if we were able to remove this capability? And I guess over the next few weeks, we'll be able to have this conversation.
It's hard to know, Kaylee, because it's 300 feet below ground. And it's hard for us to imagine what the bunker busters are actually able to do because you can't see it.
Yeah, and from what I understand, we plan to pick up some of the post-damage assessment from signals intelligence so we can overhear Iranian communications. We're very sophisticated, and Israel has penetrated deep within Iran. So they have assets in their informants who will give us that information. Look, Iran today tried to save face, and instead they fell on their face spectacularly. And if you had any question if Iran was a rational actor, I believe the answer to that is categorically no. You know, this all began, the posture before Fordo was hit, was President Trump saying unconditional surrender. Iran responded, we will never surrender. Okay, that's to the number one power in the world. We are the hegemonic power here in the United States. So that was their answer. Then they were asked, hey, are you going to negotiate with the United States? They said, no. And they said, and we will never end enrichment. We would rather have war. That is the posture of Iran. And then today, maybe it was an intentionally weak response, maybe not, but any response in my mind against the world's hegemonic power was going to end this way. And instead what they got today, China's already left, Russia's already left. Well, guess who condemned the attacks? Bahrain, Kuwait, Oman, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Egypt, Morocco, Jordan, Lebanon, Turkey, Yemen, and the Palestinian Authority. So you've literally lost everyone in the Middle East. Everyone except I think Iraq hasn't condemned it yet. Maybe they have. And I just want to say, lastly, just how wrong everyone has been on President Trump. You know, they said tariffs, you know, the economy is going to end. Well, the economy is still rolling along. Oil is going to rise. Well, oil's falling. World War III is about to start. Well, instead, you've got the entire Middle East, it seems, set up in a posture where we may see more Middle East peace accords. So rather than World War III, we may get more peace. And rather than 34 felony counts, President Trump may end up with 34 Nobel Peace Prizes. That was for the leftists. So you can clip this and make it go viral and go nuts.
One of my favorite tweets over the weekend was somebody who said, he just started World War III, and it's over.
Exactly.
Click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You won't get it anywhere else.
Sorry, folks, like the Wi-Fi is down.
Oh, great. What am I going to do for the next 5 hours? Play the new puzzle game, Royal Kingdom. It's the pastime on long flights. There's no Wi-Fi. The game's not going to work. Relax. Royal Kingdom doesn't need Wi-Fi. Does it? No. It's pretty cool. Yeah, it's a cool game. Well, I'm sure it is, but I will pass on all those annoying ads, thank you. Oh, you think it has ads? You're hilarious. Wait, it doesn't have ads? No. But I can't download it because there's no Wi-Fi. You know what? Until then, I'm going to let you watch me play. Oh, thank you. I'd rather read the emergency instructions. All right. Give me that. That's really rude. I know. Oh, wow. Can I have my phone? I just got you to a new level.
Great news, folks. The Wi-Fi is back online.
See? Look at that. You can download it onto your phone now. I'm killing it. Well, kill it on your own phone. No. Download it. I'm in the middle of something. All right. You want me to put it on your phone? Give me your phone. Do what you got to do. Oh, my God. I don't want to get aggressive with you. Download Royal Kingdom. And join us today.
Will I find a solution?
With Taiwan Semiconductor, yes, you will. The perfect solution is here. Together, we will win.
Will I find a perfect match?
With Taiwan Semiconductor, yes, you will. Here are your ideal components with a zero defect policy.
Will I find the best value and quality?
With Taiwan Semiconductor, yes, you will. Quality first, and you deserve more value than just the best quality. With Taiwan Semiconductor, yes, you will. Of course, we are all time chasers, so no time to wait, right?
Will I have someone who really knows my need?
With Taiwan Semiconductor, yes, you will. We stand by you with long-term experience. We've got your back, my friend.
right, well, let's bring in Sean Hannity, our friend. Just spoke to President Trump last night. He joins us now with more about that conversation. Good morning, Sean. What did the president tell you?
Good morning. Before I get to the president, I really was paying very close attention to everything that Jennifer Griffin was reporting here. The deception, the intelligence, the planning, the precision, the Tomahawks, the B-2s, the bunker buster bombs. If you just pause and think of the minutia, the level of detail, the precision, every American should be very proud today of every man and woman that works in our military and everybody that was part of the planning and an operation that took place so successfully last night. The fact that all of this went undetected. You can hear in the level of detail every single aspect of it. You hear danger. This was something I was warning about, Rachel, last week, that there is no military effort that does not have danger associated with it. I can add one little bit of context I can add to the specific detail that Jennifer went into, which was so comprehensive, and it should make, again, every American proud. But I can say they were really, if you listen to the president and listen very closely to what he has been saying, Iran cannot have nuclear weapons. He said last night, now you have another opportunity for peace. You did not take the first opportunity. And part two of our military operation is to protect American assets in the region. That was well underway, under the radar, long before anybody even got there. There were people that were being removed from the region. Fortification of certain places were taking place. And I think the president was very clear that the consequences would be devastating and severe. He said we already took out the hard targets, and they are certainly vulnerable in terms of the entire economy of Iran is based on their selling of oil. So a lot of those oil refineries are in one particular area. Their power grid could be taken out. Compared to the operation last night, this would be a layup. And the president, he stated his objectives. His objectives were fulfilled last night. Now, the Israelis, they have a different objective because they're the ones that have been taking on through Iran directly and their proxies hundreds of thousands of missiles being fired into their towns, their communities, and their cities. And I would not be surprised at all if the Israelis decided at some point that they wanted to go after that targets. But the president was clear in terms of what American interests were, America first, America's agenda, and he has been very, very consistent in terms of his ideology, philosophy, in terms of this national security of our country, and I think he shows that consistency here.
Yeah, Sean, to your point, Pete Hegseth, Secretary Hegseth, saying today about President Trump, quote, he seeks peace in Iran, should take that path. We have just a little bit of Hegseth's comments I'd like to play for you, Sean, and that is where he's making the point that basically only President Trump could have gotten this done. Watch here.
Choose to follow your instincts. Every Mazda is designed to feel like it was made just for you.
Wake up. Many presidents have dreamed of delivering the final blow to Iran's nuclear program, and none could until President Trump. The operation President Trump planned was bold, and it was brilliant, showing the world that American deterrence is back. When this president speaks, the world should listen. And the U.S. military, we can back it up.
Sean, your thoughts?
Griff, by the way, good to see all of you. I'm watching every weekend, so I feel like I'm just having coffee with my friends on the weekend. But in all seriousness, Pete is 1,000% right. I mean, we can take this back to 1979. Griff, our mutual friend, Colonel Oliver North, actively involved in operations with Iran. He went there. He had a suicide pill with him. No president has been able to deal a blow like this to the #1 state sponsor of terror. Here's the president's calculation. It's not that complicated if you listen to what he says. And I urge everybody to hear him when he speaks. He says Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. If you go back in time, and we have, he's been saying that since 2011. Okay, he has said it consistently. He gave them a 60-day window. And then he said, are you sure? Because it's going to be bad. He gives them up to 2 more weeks. The day after, that was Thursday. On Friday, you have the Iranian foreign minister said, no, they're not going to be involved in any conversations. And then last night happens. But it is consistent with what the president has done. I know a lot of people want to discuss and talk about or relitigate Iraq and Afghanistan. Well, we can relitigate one part of Afghanistan, and that's when Donald Trump dropped the mother of all bombs on Afghanistan. We can relitigate how to deal with Iran in the past, and the Iranians could have learned something when General Soleimani was taken off that tarmac and that terror threat was removed. We could have learned something when President Trump took out Baghdadi and associates, and we really could have learned a lot if we watched President Trump. Remember, under Obama and Biden, the ISIS caliphate built up. It was a clear and present danger to the world, and Donald Trump systematically wiped them out step by step. He walked them back, and the ISIS caliphate ceases to exist. Now, what's fascinating is what's going to happen next. Clearly, our military, our Pentagon is prepared for any possible retaliation. But the message has been sent, like the message was sent before last night. The message before last night was, you can't have a nuclear weapon. Take a peaceful solution. We are offering you a pathway towards such. Part 2 of that is, if you attack any assets of the United States of America in the region, we will overwhelmingly devastate you. I would argue, off the top of my head, probably the first 2 targets would be refineries, their electric grid that is run by gas, and probably, if we know, as the president had stated last week, where the supreme leader is, the rest or the remaining leadership, because the Israelis had already wiped out most of it to begin with. But a message has been sent to the world. The Trump doctrine is very different, very unique than any other president in the history of this country. And I think he has proven that you can successfully take out and neutralize threats in the world without getting involved in forever wars. I think he's proven that once again. It doesn't mean that there's still not we're in danger. Joe Biden and Kamala allowed, known terrorists into our country, so we have to be on the watch right now.
Now, Sean, Pete Hegseth said that Donald Trump, or President Trump, effectively obliterated Iran's nuclear ambitions, and I think that that's fair to say. We obviously need to see more out of the site and how much, but it appears that is what has happened, and that's a good thing. I agree with you. I believe that President Trump is a lot different than any other Republicans, and he's the master negotiator. He's extended the olive branch, to the Iranian regime and said, let's have peace. But what about Israel's ambitions for regime change? Can that also be curtailed in order to get that peace negotiation and end things so that it doesn't expand?
Well, Displays to Go is more than a digital signage supplier. We're a full-service partner, offering innovative digital hardware, best-in-class software, and comprehensive support to help your brand stand out. Choose Displays to Go for digital signage that can display slideshows, menus, interactive experiences, and much more. Shop today at DisplaysToGo.com.
Hey, Chicagoland, are you looking for a new car with a great offer and a low price? Look no further. Visit Happy Hyundai of Libertyville for some low APR financing and lease offers and big discounts on our award-winning Hyundai vehicle lineup and save month. During our Hyundai sales event, get low APR financing on the Hyundai Tucson, Hyundai Palisade, and Hyundai Elantra. Our lease offers are also at an all-time low. During our Hyundai Sell-a-thon, take advantage of low APR offers on the Hyundai Tucson, Hyundai Elantra, and Hyundai Santa Fe.
If you're looking for a used car, we've got you covered as well. We at Happy Hyundai have one of the largest selections of pre-owned SUVs, trucks, and sedans available, with over 300 vehicles in stock. We have used cars for every budget and style, and all of our used cars. Visit your #1 Chicago Hyundai dealer to test drive our Hyundai vehicles and take advantage of great savings. We're 5-star rated, family owned, proudly serving the greater Chicago region for decades. Be sure to check out our website or stop by at our dealership, located in Libertyville on Milwaukee Avenue.
As Miley says, we'll wait and see what Israel and Iran say.
We were still waiting on the impact of the initial US strikes on Iran as well, and what sort of damage they did on those enriched uranium stockpiles, and whether or not they had been moved out. Really interesting. Still a lot of questions to be asked.
But as Keir mentioned, the Israelis still have a lot of unfinished business, especially when it comes to that uranium that nobody knows where it's gone. So, I mean, it's unclear where this is all going to be going from here. It all starts hours from now, according to the president. Again, we haven't heard anything from the Israelis. It's very 30, so we might not hear anything, but it's going to be before dawn when this ceasefire actually starts, or around dawn. So this country is going to be experiencing quite a bit of whiplash in the next couple of hours.
And we are just receiving word about a possible ceasefire between Israel and Iran.
According to the president, 24 hours after the ceasefire begins, the fighting between the two countries will end. A U.S. official and other sources say while the president reserves the right to respond, there are no active plans for the United States to retaliate at this time.
This is just out of the White House, where President Donald Trump announced a, quote, complete and total ceasefire. In a post on Truth Social, the president says the ceasefire is agreed on by Israel and Iran. The president detailed that Iran will start the ceasefire, followed by Israel in about 6 hours from now. President Trump says this will mark the end of the 12-day war, but this ceasefire comes after a day of Iranian airstrikes targeting U.S. forces in Qatar.
Iranian armed forces saying it targeted the Al Udeid air base in Qatar after the U.S. bombed 3 nuclear facilities over the weekend. U.S. officials say they had been notified of threats against U.S. forces on bases in Bahrain as well as other countries in the Middle East.
So, he says, the war which was considered is ending. Officially, Iran will start the ceasefire, and upon the 12th hour, Israel will start the ceasefire, and upon the 24th hour, an official end to the 12-day war will be saluted by the world. During each ceasefire, the other side will remain peaceful and respectful. On the assumption that everything works as it should, which it will, I'd like to congratulate both countries, Israel and Iran, on having the stamina, courage, and intelligence to end what should be called the 12-day war, he's gone on to say. This is a war that could have gone on for years and destroyed the entire Middle East, but it didn't and never will. God bless the Middle East, God bless the United States of America, and God bless the world. So that points to a ceasefire, even with hour marks on it, that just in from Donald Trump.
It appeared that they were looking for an off-ramp out of this conflict, and with this development, it appears that there is now going to be this ceasefire. The big questions that we don't have is there now going to be a nuclear deal? We know that Donald Trump has said that Iran cannot enrich uranium, a key step to developing a nuclear weapon. We will have to wait and see if that is going to be negotiated and if there is going to be a deal as a result of this ceasefire. Guys.
This is what Donald Trump wanted, Miley. So interesting, though, the change of attitude and how quickly it's all calm. In that message, it said this is a war that could have gone for years and destroyed the entire Middle East, but it didn't and never will. God bless Israel. God bless Iran, God bless the Middle East, God bless the United States of America, and God bless the world. What a turnaround in tension.
Donald Trump will certainly be attempting to frame this as a win for America politically and militarily. He said that he wanted to go in and hit those sites. He didn't want to go into a long, drawn-out war. We can assume that that's how he will be framing this. He is now trying to transition out of this conflict into what appears to be a peacemaker by saying that they have now agreed to this ceasefire. I will say we don't have that confirmation from Israel and Iran that they have also agreed to this. We haven't heard from Iran's supreme leader in a couple of days now, so it's unclear what his stance is going to be on this. We'll have to wait and see what Iran and what Israel are going to say about this apparent ceasefire.
Okay, it's apparently happening in 6 hours' time.
What do you think? Can it hold?
Yeah, I don't even know how that's possible. The United States isn't even talking to Iran. You heard Secretary of State Rubio say that over the weekend. I'd like to hear the Iranians say it and the Israelis say it as well. I think it's not, frankly, in Israel's best interest to stop anything right now. We don't know whether exactly the United States did eradicate the Iranian nuclear capability or not. So there's a lot of unknowns there. I understand his desire to try to stop it, and he uses the word ceasefire, and only Donald Trump can put out a tweet like that. But I don't know. I'm skeptical.
Well, I mean, he goes on to say it's been fully agreed by and between Israel and Iran, and he goes on to say
I'm blind and I'm putting my guide dog to the test. Okay. On this plate, we have a big, juicy, delicious cut of steak. And over here, I have my brand new discovery, Jinx Kibble. Which one do you think he's going to pick, Matthew? The steak or this premium, all-natural, grass-fed beef kibble? I'm sorry, he's going to pick the steak. Matthew, whatever one he doesn't pick, we're eating for Valentine's Day dinner, okay? What? Yes! I am not going to eat dog food. You don't know which one he's going to pick. Deal? I guess so. Deal? Maybe. Don't let us down, buddy. What's it going to be? Steak. Okay. Yes! Yeah, we can send our dinner! Baby loves the steak! I almost jumped. I ran toward the steak. Because I was like, oh my God. You didn't trust Jake! Whoa! Oh wow, that was amazing.
What happens when real patients move curing hepatitis C from their to-do list to their today list?
I was able to move forward without Hep C doing more damage to my body.
Understanding side effects was important to me. I talked to my doctor about Epclusa.
All types of chronic hepatitis C.
I thought treatment would interrupt my life, but one pill a day was easy.
With a 98% cure rate, Epclusa is one pill once a day for 12 weeks. Epclusa can also be taken during addiction recovery. If you've had hepatitis B, it may flare up and cause serious liver problems during and after treatment. Tell your doctor if you've had hepatitis B, liver or kidney problems, HIV, and all medicines and supplements you take. Taking amiodarone with Epclusa may cause a serious slowing of your heart rate. Most common side effects include headache and tiredness.
I put Epclusa on my today list. I only wish I'd done it sooner.
Ask your doctor about Epclusa today.
He goes on to say various levels of the ceasefire, 6 hours from now, 12 hours from now, in what will officially be known as a 12-day war, if you like. I mean,
yeah, he's got it already marketed and everything.
He's marketed, yeah. So I mean, is it possible?
Cards on the table. I don't see it. It's not that I don't want to see a peaceful solution here. I mean, I don't see how Iran, for the past 47 years, in their DNA, is an enemy, a sworn enemy of the United States, and I just don't see them flipping this switch to this some kind of peace. The only peace that the Israelis are going to agree to is unlimited inspections of Iran's facilities, and there's a lot of other things that Israel is going to be looking for from the Iranian government that frankly they're not part of the international community. Donald Trump has called them a bully before. I don't see how that tiger changes their stripes or spots or what, pick your adjective there. I'm just floored by it, and I just hope it's going to be something of the truth, but I'm very skeptical still.
Well, I mean, let's get to the attack now on the American base in Qatar this morning. So, I mean, it's interesting in the New York Times, it's running a story at the moment that Iran actually coordinated the attacks on the American airbase with Qatari officials and gave advance notice that the attacks were coming to minimize casualties. And the officials said that Iran symbolically needed to strike back to allow all sides an exit ramp.
Yeah.
Your thoughts on that?
Again, it's like theater. I'm sorry. I just don't accept the fact that we're okay with it on any level. So, after Soleimani was killed in 19, they fired. It took them 5 days. And that they have to try to save face based on this Middle Eastern, crazy way to negotiate. But again, I'm in the camp that says you fire missiles at us no matter what. We have the right to respond. And Trump didn't. We're obviously on the escalation ladder. At least this president decided to take out that nuclear capability. I think Israel really wanted to have comfort with, because that was the existential threat. But they want more. They definitely want regime change. I think they would go after the supreme leader if they could. So from my perspective, again, I'm just surprised that we're playing this game with these people.
So do you think there should be a response to that attack, which was thwarted this morning, even though Donald Trump seems to be okay with it, calling it weak but pointing to peace?
Yeah, considering that it was coordinated, I don't know what our response would be. Act of warfare that we just don't need to execute. Our mission was clearly only on the nuclear facilities. I'm sure we watched satellites, them lining up to shoot those missiles. If we wanted to, we could have intercepted them before, similar to what Israel's been doing already inside of Iran. Again, it's missile attack Kabuki theater, and I just don't understand this as part of warfare, given what the situation is.
Do you think that nuclear capabilities and facilities have been wiped out? Have they been obliterated, or is it right?
Well, they've been set back. Look back at times when the quote unquote the can gets kicked down the road. You look in U.S. history, for example, the fact that the U.S. history doesn't solve slavery when it's founded and we have a civil war. The can got kicked down the road. Well, the can got kicked down the road in 2015 with the JCPOA, because right now, if that agreement was still in place, Iran could be fully enriching nuclear weapons and be on their way and path to a bomb. So all I did was delay, and I think now this attack clearly kicks the can down the road again, but the question is how long. The nuclear genie's out of the bottle. Everybody knows how to make a nuke. The question is, what kind of facilities do they have left to do it?
Arlington Nissan has something for you. We have selection. Arlington Nissan has something for you because we never have a shortage of inventory. We have community. Arlington Nissan has something for you because we speak many languages. We have assurance. Arlington Nissan has something for you because we offer complimentary service on all new purchases. Arlington Nissan, selection, community, and assurance. Something for everybody.
Envisioned by Inspired Closets. See your closet come to life.
It's time for Lefties Losing It. And we've heard the ladies of The View say some crazy, catastrophically dumb stuff over the years. They're a rich source of material for this segment, but this week they've really hit a new low. Listen to this derangement. Here, Whoopi Goldberg claims that Americans can't be critical of Iran's gross human rights abuses because life is just as bad for Americans in America if they're different, if they're gay or black.
And it's slow.
But let's just remember, too, the Iranians literally throw gay people off of buildings. They don't adhere to basic human rights.
Listen, here's the thing. Let's not do that, because if we start with that, we have been known in this country to tie gay folks to the car.
Where the Iranian regime is nothing compared to the United States.
Hanging black people. So
it is not even the same. I couldn't step during this.
Wait. That's not what you mean to say. It is the same.
No, it's not. The year 2025 in the United States is nothing like if I step foot wearing this outfit into Iran and killed for
I'm sorry.
I can't have my hair showing. I can't wear a skirt. I can't have my arms out.
I'm telling you,
I literally said it was up to the Iranian people.
Yes, it is up to them. And that's why I am saying it is the same. Murdering someone for their difference is not good, whoever does it. It's not good. So that's why I said you weren't what I heard was not what you meant.
I think it's very different to live in the United States in 2025 than it is to live in Iran.
Not if you're black.
Not for everybody.
Not if you're black.
I mean, where do you even start? Is she really likening crime happening in America to the Iranian regime, the government killing gay people, killing infidels, beating and locking up women for showing their hair? Can she possibly be that stupid, or is she just a massive liar? Because right now, there are no other options.
Nobody wants to diminish the very real problems we have in this country. That is no one's intent. But I think it's important we remember there are places much darker than this country, and people who deserve
Listen, not everybody feels that way. Not everybody feels that way. Listen, I'm sorry. You know, when you think about the fact that we got the vote in 1965.
Okay, they don't have free and fair elections in Iran. It's not even the same universe.
They can't go out of their house. The women.
You know what? There's no way I can make you understand.
No words are not your friends, Whoopi. Neither is logic and facts. Perhaps white savior, the awful, affluent white female lefty Joy Behar can explain it for you.
Try to reverse roles with a black person in this country, let's say, because I think that's what you're talking about.
Yes.
Just try to understand from their point of view. From that point of view, this country does not do them well. Does not go for them.
I completely acknowledge that.
And we shouldn't compare atrocities.
If you're talking about Iran, of course, is doing worse things, but relatively speaking, it feels bad.
Relatively speaking, are these women insane? You heard Sonny there say we shouldn't compare atrocities. What, like someone not respecting your pronouns compared to being hung in the public square for crimes like adultery, homosexuality, and blasphemy? Really? And the viewers had a terrible week because they had Hollywood star and former California Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger on, and he being a bit of a TDS sufferer, they expected him to rail against Trump's deportation program. He didn't, and they weren't happy.
You are an immigrant. You're an immigrant in this country. Yeah. Did you have a visceral reaction to what they're doing, what ICE is doing, when you see the videos of it?
Well, I tell you, you said that the immigrant, I'm so proud and happy that I was embraced by the American people like that. I mean, imagine I came over here with the age of 21, with absolutely nothing. And then to create a career like that.
Oh no, he's not answering as they expect. Maybe he'll eventually the deportation program. But no, Arnie wants immigrants to behave legally.
But the key thing also is at the same time that we got to do things legal. That is the important thing, you know. So you got to do things legal. And those people that are doing illegal things in America and that are foreigners, they are not smart. Because when you come to America, you're a guest. And you have to behave like a guest. And to make my bed and to do everything that is the right thing to do.
I was deciding to do a post on Instagram, Facebook about how I viewed the conflict in the Middle East and whether I thought it was Gog and Magog, blah, blah, blah. And after I finished that up and I posted it, then my wife came into my study and said, do you know we just bombed Iran? And I said, well, I knew that, you know, Iran was a bomb, but I didn't realize we had done it. And so I thought probably, I was trying to avoid having to say anything about it this morning because it would just say, just go online. But something I would like to say, I think I need to say, is that despite the fears that people have that this is going to lead to World War III, the fact of the matter is this probably prevented World War III. And the reason is because if you understand basically the form of Shia Islam, which believes that the Mahdi will come into the world, he's their version of the Messiah. Most people don't realize that Islam has a very apocalyptic view of the future, and they believe that when the world is in major conflagration, then the Mahdi will come. And so part of the agenda of the Islamic Nazis in Iran is to bring chaos, destruction, conflict, and warfare The nuclear missiles were not something that they just wanted for their own defensive purposes. They were offensive, and they were looking to create a world-changing crisis that would bring their savior, the Mahdi, into the world.
Iran's foreign minister has arrived in Moscow for talks with Vladimir Putin and other senior Russia officials. There's a deep partnership between the two countries that has grown in recent years, especially after Iran supplied Moscow with drones and missiles in its war against Ukraine. And then there's North Korea and China. Iran and North Korea reportedly share missile technology and nuclear research, and China maintains strong diplomatic and economic relations with both countries.
Foreign Minister of Iran is going to Russia today. And ahead of that meeting, the former president of Russia, Dmitry Medvedev, says this: the enrichment of nuclear material, and now we can say it outright, the future production of nuclear weapons continue. A number of countries are ready to directly supply Iran with their own nuclear warheads. That is just off the charts crazy.
Today in Moscow, Iran's foreign minister met with Russian President Vladimir Putin. Putin said there was no justification for the U.S. attack and that Russia would help the Iranian people, but he didn't say much more.
Thousands took to the streets in Iran's capital city, Tehran, protesting America's action.
The Iranian president was there as demonstrators chanted death to Israel and no surrender, battle with America. However, there is another side, many Iranians who are in favor of the strikes, hoping for a regime change.
And there is some behind the scenes footage I think we've got there. Those B-2 bombers in the lead up to that American attack. This morning, there's now some cautious optimism that this conflict could de-escalate, that Iran will take this diplomatic off-ramp, and certainly the messaging from the US president at this hour, it is time for peace.
Iran has been very central. There are drones every day being used against Ukraine. This is an ally, and I think more broadly speaking, Russia's role, Putin's policy, I want to be clear about that. Putin's policy in the Middle East has suffered yet another blow. He lost Assad, Hamas and Hezbollah are weakened, now Iran is weakened. So the short term, this is very bad for Russia. But in the longer term, I think this is actually good for Russia in two ways. One, we're now legitimating preemptive war. That's what Putin says he did against Ukraine. And now that we've joined that, this is just how great powers act. I think that's bad for America's long-term interests. And moreover, you mentioned North Korea, you mentioned China. We are now isolating ourselves.
Over Qatar tonight.
Southwest, coming from the direction of
Iran's retaliation. Multiple missiles fired towards Al Udeid Air Base and US Central Command. These the first retaliatory strikes, with bases across the region put on high alert. The Iranians say this is Operation Annunciation of Victory. First intelligence suggested imminent attacks on the base the British share with the Americans.
Following a US security alert for their nationals in Qatar, out of an abundance of caution, we now recommend that British nationals in Qatar shelter in place until further notice.
Our Commander-in-Chief, Donald J. Trump.
It's just over a month now since Donald Trump visited Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar as part of his tour of the Middle East, promising commerce over chaos. The events of the weekend have certainly changed that. Earlier, Iran had warned retribution would come to the United States and Israel for the weekend strikes on Iran's nuclear sites.
Bismillahir-Rahmanir-Rahim.
Whatever the scale, the very act of this crime and desecration will not go unanswered, the head of Iran's armed forces warned.
You know, some have been speculating we're going to give Iran nuclear weapons. The former president of Russia said that, Dmitry Medvedev, in the last 24 hours. I don't think they have a lot of capabilities. That's in the short run. In the medium term to long term, two things are very clear. One, we'll never have a UN Security Council resolution trying to prevent Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon. Remember, the JCPOA, the Iran nuclear deal from 2015, that just wasn't the United States and Iran. That was Russia was a part of that. We will never have them to together to prevent Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon. And second, in the long run, when Russia does have that capabilities, I think we should fully expect that when Russia can, Russia will help Iran against us. I just think that the world is divided now, and they are together, and hopefully we will put together a coalition of allies in the future. But in the long run, you will see Russia much more supportive of Iran. Think about their missile defense systems, the S-400s, S-500s. Those are the kinds of weapons that we used to help prevent Iran from having that I think they will now have in the future.
I mean, it's interesting because none of this is in the Quran. This is what they call the Hadiths. It's basically the writings of their various prophets and historians and so forth. So all of that to say that we, by doing what was done, I think it removes obviously the capacity, and we'll continue to see the diminishing of Iran's capacity, because they not only are despised and torturous over their own people, but they also want to foment as much harm and destruction in the world as they possibly can. And for whatever reasons, God has given us a respite. Opinion is that we're seeing right now in our country and around the world the result of God's people praying. And I think that we need to continue to pray. Okay? So now we can read Revelation 21, beginning in verse 9, okay? It says, one of the seven angels who had the seven bowls full of the seven last plagues came and said to me, come, I will show you the bride, the wife of the Lamb. And he carried me away in the Spirit to a mountain great and high, and showed me the holy city of Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God. It shone with the glory of God, and its brilliance was a precious jewel, like a jasper, and yet clear as crystal. It had a great high wall with 12 gates and 12 angels at the gates. And on the gates were written the names of the 12 tribes of Israel. And there were 3 gates on the east, and 3 on the north, and 3 on the south, and 3 on the west. And the wall of the city had 12 foundations, and on them were the names of the 12 apostles of the Lamb. The angel who talked with me had a measuring rod of gold to measure the city, its gates, and its walls. The city was laid out like a square as long as it was wide, basically a cube. He measured the city with a rod and found it to be 12,000 stadia in length, as wide and as high as it is long, basically about 1,500 miles each way cubed. He measured its walls at 144 cubits thick, or about 216 feet thick. And by man's measurement, he said, which the angel was using, the wall was made of jasper, the city of pure gold, as pure as glass. The foundation of the city walls was decorated with every kind of precious stone. The first foundation was jasper, the second sapphire, the third chalcedony, the fourth emerald, the fifth sardonyx, the sixth carnelian, the seventh chrysolite, the eighth beryl, the ninth topaz, the 10th chrysoprase, the 11th jacinth, and the 12th amethyst. The 12 gates were 12 pearls, each gate made of a single pearl. And the great street of the city was of pure gold like transparent glass.
Let's hear this.
Fully agreed by and between Israel and Iran that there will be a complete and total ceasefire. Complete and total ceasefire is what he typed.
Yep.
What does that mean?
Oh, you warmongers! We're gonna be in World War III. We're gonna be in World War III. He ain't for America. Trump don't love America. This is not what I voted
but
for.
If I'm talking to my homie,
apologize.
It just bothers you because fuck you. Yeah. How you
With everything going on in the world, the protests, the crime, the civil unrest, you never know when you might be forced to defend yourself or your loved ones. And in that moment,
One decision could change your life forever. That's why I trust attorneys on retainer, whether it's a self-defense situation or a use of force incident, or just being in the wrong place at the wrong time. ARR gives you the immediate legal protection and a team of attorneys ready to fight for you 24/7. Right now, you'll get $50 off the sign-up fee for an individual plan or $25 off the sign-up fee for a family plan. Just use promo code Tatum at checkout. Go to attorneysonretainer.us and sign up today. We got breaking news right now. This is Donald Trump saying this. Get your money back because you wasted $10 talking to me.
Latino culture.
Let's look at what it said.
Like, are you fucking kidding me?
Congratulations to everyone.
Speak for them. I live with
it has been fully agreed by and between Israel and Iran that there will be a complete and total ceasefire.
Shut your white ass up.
All you warmongers, we're gonna be in World War III. We're gonna be in World War III. This is he ain't for America.
I love this guy. Hear me?
Trump don't love America.
I don't like how he's portraying people's fear about World War III there. You know, and I love this guy a lot. I don't like that. He's sitting there acting like people are, you know, stupid for feeling that way. Dude, that was fucking, that fucking put everybody into at least, you know, wondering at least being concerned. I mean, that was something to really fear. What if Russia got involved? What if China got involved? What if Pakistan actually nuked Israel like they said they were going to? That's why I don't like how he's portraying people's fear about that shit. It was something to really fear. Our kids can say they actually had to worry about World War III. We never had to say, we couldn't say that. Growing up our whole lives, we just missed the Cold War. We had nothing. What we have? Fucking Desert Storm.
Apologize. No. Don't apologize to me. Apologize to Trump.
Seconds ago, the president went to Truth Social and typed this. It has been fully agreed by and between.
I agree with him about the people who were attacking Trump right away, saying that, you know, just go into World War III like right away, instantly. I mean, they didn't know. Like I said, I have no idea what's going to happen here. I had no clue what's going to happen with it. My fear is I don't have fucking no food stocked up.
So maybe it's the fear that gets our ass moving, like mine anyway. I'm trying to get stuff like that.
Yeah, well,
I just bought a case of water. It's halfway gone. You know what I mean? Like I need to buy 5 cases of water or 10. You know.
Israel and Iran, that there will be a complete and total ceasefire. Complete and total ceasefire is what he typed.
Yep.
What does that mean? How did it come about? What's the development?
Yeah. Well, we were actually working on that just as I left the White House to come over here. So that's good news that the president was able to get that across the finish line. I think what it means, Brett, is quite simple. First of all, the president, without, knock on wood, having a single American casualty, obliterated the Iranian nuclear base where we weren't a week ago. A week ago, Iran was very close to having a nuclear weapon. Now, Iran is incapable of building a nuclear weapon with the equipment they have because we destroyed it. So that's a very, very big thing. Now, what that means, I think, is we have to talk to Iran and, of course, to Israel about what the future holds. Because while obliterated the Iranian nuclear program, our hope and our expectation is that they're not going to try to rebuild that program. And I think that's what the president is really trying to figure out here, is to build a long-term settlement here to where we can have peace in the region, where our regional allies, and of course the American people most importantly, can be secured, but where we can ensure that the destruction of the Iranian nuclear program that has already happened is not something they try to rebuild.
And this is why people follow Brandon Tatum. Because I have wisdom, bro. I know what I'm talking about. When it first came out, I said, we do things proxy through Israel. I'm like, no, we do things proxy through Israel. Do you think that Donald Trump didn't know that Benjamin Netanyahu was going to bomb Israel? Was going to bomb Iran?
No.
Like, what crack are y'all smoking? And then I said it because
remember I told you at first, I was like, I don't know if we knew that. I've come to my own decision. We 100% knew that Israel was bombing Iran. We 100% knew that they were going to bomb Iran. That's why we called for people to get the fuck out of there before it happened. Trump knew he wasn't going to the negotiation table Sunday. You hear me?
I know what's going on. Then Trump come out and say, we are doing this, we are doing that. I know already. It's not rocket science. They're our biggest ally. We give them so much money. You think we ain't in cahoots with them? What are we talking about? We do things proxy through them all the time. Okay, then we go on to the war, and I say, I trust Donald Trump. I know Donald Trump is going to do what he said he's going to do. I know Donald Trump is not going to get us in endless wars. Donald Trump has said from the beginning that Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. Donald Trump bombed Soleimani, and they did not do nothing. They did a little retaliation to save face, and they didn't do nothing. And we didn't get into World War III. We didn't do none of that. And then when Donald Trump does what he does now, and I watch how strategic, how methodical, and crisp Israel went in and defeated their airspace and communication with no pushback.
No. That's not true, dude. America went in there. We went in there. We dropped them bombs. We just attacked them. There was a retaliatory strike. I think the Israel and Iran thing would have kept going over for a long time if, like, we didn't just do what we did. Don't you? I mean, it was just going back and forth for, what, 10 weeks now? 11 weeks or something like that?
It told me that they were prepared, and Iran is not ready for it. And Donald Trump came in and we finished the job, and I say, Donald Trump and them knew exactly what we needed to do. Iran don't want no smoke with America. Russia not trying to get involved in it. And then what happens? After you whoop somebody good enough, you go, are you ready to stop now? Okay, that's what I thought.
If this, in fact, effectively sets back the program and doesn't lead to wider escalation, the president seems to have accomplished all of the objectives that he set out to achieve.
Of course, I told you yesterday I didn't think we were at war and that this represented a de-escalation of the situation. And that's exactly where we are with this flaccid Iranian response. In the words of the great boxer Roberto Duran, no mas, no mas. That's what Iran is saying after Israel has degraded their military capabilities. The United States has taken away their ability to make nuclear weapons. This is capitulation, in my opinion, from Iran today, and it is a complete and total vindication.
Helps, regardless if China helps. The United States could completely wipe Iran off the fucking map. You know, and then Russia will still be there, China will still be there, but Iran won't.
Which was to let Israel beat these guys to a pulp. We show up and take away their nukes. Yes, let's have a deal now. I think it'd be great to have a deal with Iran about right now. This is not an escalation. This is a de-escalation.
Well, Trump promised escalation.
This is not
Trump promised escalation.
Bunker busting bombs is not an escalation.
Because what she said President Trump promised us peace. I ask you, can we have peace if Iran has a nuclear weapon?
Well, we had a deal, and
you're litigating the past.
I'm not litigating the past.
Can we have peace if they have a nuclear weapon?
We had a deal. He's trying to get back into that deal. And he withdrew from that.
They were violating
and not only that, now he's trying to have another deal.
Bribery and appeasement does not work with terrorism.
Hold on.
And you got people out here going, see, Trump has just made it worse. Iran is now going to get us. I think somebody sold me a post. Somebody was like, splinter cells in America to happen. It's like, wait a minute.
At Shriners Children's, we're home to the world's leading pediatric orthopedic care. Because
months they've been making overtures to Iran, trying to, lower the tensions. But certainly they know that they could be a target because there are U.S. military bases here as well. It's interesting, with all their condemnations of the violation of Qatar's sovereignty, not one of the countries in the region mentioned U.S. bases and the fact that it was the U.S. that was targeted. It was almost as though they were trying not to remind Iran that they have, thousands of U.S. troops and this presence here as well. And another interesting thing as well is it was only last month that President Trump was here in the UAE, in Qatar, at that base that was targeted, in Saudi. The red carpet treatment, he was talking about billions of dollars of deals. He mentioned that the birth of a new Middle East. And look where we are now. It's staggering how quickly it's happened.
On the precipice of a world war, and there's so many fear. General Kimmett, when we look at the map of bases in the region, it's just worth considering, just near where we are, right? You've got up to 30,000 troops in the UAE and Bahrain and Qatar, more U.S. naval ships docked in the UAE than anywhere else outside the United States, right? I mean, this is a massive presence. I know you spend a lot of time at bases in the region. You were here just recently. What is your biggest fear for U.S. bases if this does escalate?
Well, you've correctly identified two of the threats, terrorists and missiles. But I think we need to talk about the third threat, which are the Iranian-backed militias, primarily in Iraq and in some other countries as well. But I'm not necessarily too concerned because all of the bases went into high force protection levels almost a week ago. And Aaron, you know what that looks like. They're wearing their helmets. They're wearing their protective vests. They're not going out unless they need to. The last time we had a level like this was in 2020 when Soleimani was targeted and the Iranians responded with ballistic missiles on Al-Assad base. Everybody was tucked in, everybody's in shelter, everybody was doing the right thing. However, there were some TBIs. So I think what you need to consider, the United States troops right now are somewhat like Israeli citizens. They know when to go into the bunkers. They know what the sirens are like. Most of them have been through this before, so hopefully they'll be safe.
Long live Iran. While they're over there chanting that too.
All right, General, thank you very much. Barack, Paula, thanks so much to all of you. And our breaking news coverage continues here live from the Middle East. We're going to take you live to Tel Aviv. Did Israel agree to the ceasefire that Trump has announced, or was it a surprise? And Iran's Supreme
planet is yet another war and continued escalation.
Yeah.
So I hope wiser voices will prevail and we'll find the road ahead.
Well, listen, thank you very much for this because you were there in the room and you did get a deal, and we've seen the danger now come to a head when that deal was thrown out. Secretary of State John Kerry, thank you very much for being with us. Now we're going to get more on the breaking news of Iranian missiles at U.S. bases with correspondent Paton Walsh. He's been following developments. Tell us what we know now.
Yeah. At this point, Christian, I think the key thing is to assess the damage. At this point, the Qataris have, through their foreign ministry, said that the missiles were all intercepted and there were no deaths and injuries. This is clearly what's responsible for the fireworks you're seeing there remarkably over the skies of Doha near the Al-Udeid American base. The American base evacuated in the past days. Clearly Iranian retaliation in the region. And we've also Director of the Iranian National Security Council saying, and I paraphrase here, that the number of bombs dropped or the number of weapons used in these retaliatory strikes against the United States are equal to the number used by the United States in their strikes on nuclear facilities. Now, I should point out, we don't know how many missiles have been fired. But 75, I think, was the total fired by the United States. That does not match some of the initial reporting as to how many missiles are followed here. But ultimately, that's not really the consequence here. The important thing is what got through. And in Qatar, we're hearing initial reports. The answer is 0. And the fact, too, that the Iranians are very telegraphing here, this is proportionate, that they are saying we fired exactly the same number that you fired at us, essentially hoping to draw a line under it. And their statement goes on to say that this attack, clearly against the territory of Qatar, but US assets on that territory, is not meant in any way to be aggression towards the sisterly nation of Qatar. So clearly I think we're seeing a remarkable moment of telegraphing building up to here. I mean, literally talking on cable news about the possibility of these attacks before they happen. The fact that this base was well known in Qatar, Al-Udeid, key to US Central Command's operations across the busiest region they have, Syria, Iraq, Iran, Afghanistan, all the major wars really of the last 20 years or so had been mostly emptied of personnel and key aircraft because of the concern of this. That was well publicized. Iran would have known that. And these missiles still fired at it with adequate warning for Qatar to be able to close its airspace in the previous hours. For this morning, the US Embassy to tell its staff Americans to shelter in place. You couldn't have much more telegraphing, and this does to some degree echo what we saw after the killing of Qasem Soleimani 2019. That occurred, and there was swiftly afterwards telegraphed response from Iran towards American facilities in Iraq. So we don't know the full extent of this. We don't indeed know if multiple bases have been targeted. The initial indications are that is not the case, but I think at this point we are seeing a very loud, after days of rhetoric, bid by Iran to show that it's able to respond, but not do anything to potentially further escalate the situation. Bear in mind, this is a country whose military capabilities are significantly weakened. They are potentially down to maybe 1,000 missiles that can hit Israel. These would have been potentially a shorter range to hit Qatar, but this is a military degraded heavily over the past 10 days. Potentially here, I think, trying to show that it has some deterrent value, but also, to be honest, Christian, through the telegraphed and frankly, probably at this point, for what we can see, not particularly effective nature of this attack, also emphasizing their weakness at this point. Christian?
Really important to get that clarification, and we will continue to monitor, obviously. Nick, thank you. Now, just before Iran fired those missiles at American bases in Qatar and Iraq, an Iranian official told CNN that it wants the U.S. to, quote, directly pay for the war. Well, maybe this is it. Iran's foreign minister met Russian President Vladimir Putin today at the Kremlin. Now, while Russia does support Iran diplomatically, and Iran supports Putin's war in Ukraine, there is no indication Putin will join Iran in any military escalation. On Sunday, Abbas Araghchi, the foreign minister, said his country had the right to self-defense.
The world must not forget that it was the United States which, in the midst of a process to forge a diplomatic outcome, betrayed diplomacy. In accordance with the UN Charter and its provisions allowing a legitimate
Visit Happy Hyundai of Libertyville for some low APR financing and lease offers and big discounts on our award-winning Hyundai.
Fareed, as is often the case in our current news cycles, as you were talking, the president just posted on Truth Social moments ago saying, quote, a ceasefire has been, quote, fully agreed to by Israel and Iran. There will be a complete end.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Ingraham Angle. I'm Laura Ingraham, my angle in moments. But first, tonight, we begin with major breaking news. It's a development that few thought was possible even a few days ago. But with President Trump in charge, we've seen time and time again, the so-called experts are proven wrong. President Trump says Israel and Iran have agreed to a full ceasefire, taking effect in just a few hours. In a Truth Social post in the last hour, the president wrote, "Congratulations to everyone. There will be a complete and total ceasefire in approximately 6 hours from now, when Israel and Iran would have wound down and completed their in-progress final missions. For 12 hours, at which point the war will be considered ended." On that assumption that everything works out as it should, which it will, I would like to congratulate both countries, Israel and Iran, on having the stamina, courage, and intelligence to end what should be called the 12-day war. This is a war that could have gone on for years and destroyed the entire Middle East, but it didn't and never will. Here with me now is Brett Baier, chief political anchor and special report anchor, executive editor there as well. Brett, you were on the air. We were all watching with Vice President Vance when Trump's Truth Social post landed. So that was in and of itself kind of hilarious. But do we have details about how this all came together in the last hour?
Well, Laura, good evening. It really was something. Let me just give you the behind the scenes. Trey Yingst was in the middle of wrapping up his report from Tel Aviv, saying Trump Truth Social coming in the email right. I look down, the vice president's right here on set with me, and as I look down to read it, his staff comes in with an iPhone so he can read the Truth Social as it's coming in. And Trey Yingst wraps up his live report. I thank him. I introduce the vice president, and obviously start with what we just heard and saw. And he said he had heard about it, talked about it, hadn't seen the final version, and that's what he was reacting to. Since then, we've learned that Qatar was the intermediary, and that Iran officials are now saying they did, in fact, authorize Qatar to negotiate on their behalf, at least according to Reuters and other wire services, and that the Israelis are going to agree to this in a 6-hour time frame. Now, what happens between now and the 6 hours? I expect a lot of kinetic action inside Iran from the Israelis, but That's what it looks like. And then the details that the president laid out about how it follows over the next 24, 48 hours, we don't know what that picture looks like or whether it leads to negotiations.
Well, what was stunning is that just in the last several hours, the Supreme Leader put out a statement saying, we will not submit. We will never submit. So something was changing in that interim time period, and I guess he was made an offer he couldn't refuse.
Maybe so. We don't know. The Supreme Leader is supposed to be holed up in a bunker. That the going thing in Iran, we're told, is that everyone doesn't know where he is except the Israelis and the U.S. And they have said that they could take him out at any time. I don't know what has transpired that changed the Iranians' bold action, other than to read the tea leaves here. They gave a pre-warning about the missile strike on Qatar and the Al-Udeid Air Base, saying this is going to happen. Get your people out of there. And then the air defenses took down those missiles, including one from Qatar. And, you know, I think that the president's response post and let's get to peace started phone calls between all of the parties, according to the vice president. And in between the time he left the White House and the time he arrived on this set, something had transpired to get that Truth Social post.
And the president even thanked Iran, heads up, as you noted with Vance, which it all seemed like it was missile theater at some point. They gave them a chance to save face, shoot up a couple of, what looked like Roman candles. I mean, they were missiles, but and no damage was done as far as we understand on the ground. So you wonder why they even went through that exercise. But nevertheless, the president didn't choose to humiliate Iran in this moment, which I think that's classic Trump. He wants to give people a way out.
He did say, let's get to peace, let's get to the table. He called it very weak and thanked them for the heads up. The pattern in 2020, the Iranians did the same thing. They fired on a U.S. military base in Iraq, but they also gave a heads up ahead of time. That was after the Soleimani assassination, the takedown of the main military commander for Iran by the U.S. And so it follows a pattern. We'll see if this also follows a ceasefire, because as you know, the Israelis feel like they have a lot of superiority in the skies and they can take out targets at will, and they're on the cusp of making a big change to their existential threat. So it may be tough for them to agree to it, but I think the president is pushing.
And Brett, although people don't want to be political in this moment, politics always enters the equation. We had an enormous amount of kind of nastiness across the political aisle over the last few days regarding the president's decision. So some Democrats were more, tepid about it, but others were basically very, very negative on what the president was doing. How do you see this moment playing out politically?
I mean, John Fetterman was the only Democrat I saw very vocal in his support of the action. Others were either tepid or saying it was unconstitutional and he had to come to Congress first. I think a lot of those Democrats, if you look back at President Obama's actions in Lebanon, in Syria, they were not anywhere near as vocal about the congressional authorization issue back then. Politically, I think it plays pretty well. He's kept his party largely together. There are some vocal voices, as you know, Marjorie Taylor Greene and others, Tom Massey, but fairly small in number and in voice. And I think it really depends how this ceasefire works out and what comes next.
Brett, thank you very much. That was an unbelievable interview.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.
Before renting with Dollar, I made some questionable travel decisions, like trying to avoid checking my bag. I'm good to go.
No.
But then I found the common sense approach to travel. Dollar. No, just makes sense. Dollar makes sense.
Fox News alert, Trump says Iran and Israel have just agreed to a ceasefire, and he expects it to last forever. But it won't go into effect for 24 hours. He's going to let them each take one last shot at each other. Congratulations to everyone. It has been fully agreed by and between Israel and Iran that there will be a complete and total ceasefire in approximately 6 hours from now, when Israel and Iran have wound down and completed their in-progress final missions for 12 hours, at which point the war will be considered ended. Officially, Iran will start the ceasefire, and upon the 12th hour, Israel will start the ceasefire, and upon the 24th hour, an official end to the 12-day war will be saluted by the world. During each ceasefire, the other side will remain peaceful and respectful on the assumption that everything works as it should, which it will. I would like to congratulate both countries, Israel and Iran, on having the stamina, courage, and intelligence to end what should be called the 12-day war. This is a war that could have gone on for years and destroyed the entire Middle East, but it didn't and never will. J.D. Vance was just on with Brett.
This is a great thing. For Israel, think about this. They've accomplished an important military objective. They've helped us destroy the Iranian nuclear program. They've also destroyed the conventional missile capability of Iran that threatened the country of Israel. For the Iranians, I think this is a new opportunity to actually pursue the path of peace. As I said yesterday, what the Iranians have showed through their support of terror networks, through their now failed effort to build a nuclear weapon, is that they're just not very good at war. And I think the president really actually produce long-term peace for the region. That's always been his goal. I actually think when we look back, we will say the 12-day war was an important reset moment for the entire region.
Reuters is also reporting that Iran has officially agreed to the terms of the ceasefire deal, just hours after they fired missiles at military bases in Qatar and Iraq. Here's the launch. Watch. The president confirmed 14 Iranian rockets were fired, saying 13 were knocked down and one was set free because it was headed in a non-threatening direction. 47 also confirming there were no casualties and hardly any damage was done. Trump calls it a very weak response, but most importantly, they've gotten it all out of their system. And there will be, hopefully, no further hate. I want to thank Iran for giving us early notice, which made it possible for no lives to be lost and nobody to be injured. Thank you for your attention to this matter. So Trump got a heads up about the Iranian attack because the Iranians didn't want American casualties. Our response would have been devastating. But the regime also had to do something to save face, especially so they can show the Iranian people that they're still in charge. So far, the mission's been flawless. No American casualties. The bombs hit their targets. No real escalation so far, and no mission creep yet. Trump gave the Iranians a deadline and he gave peace a chance. But the president felt like the Ayatollah gave him the middle finger, figuratively, when he refused to meet him in Turkey for face-to-face talks. And that came with a price. When the clock struck midnight Friday, B-2 bombers took off on a 37-hour flight, but they were prepared. These stealth bombers have bathrooms, mini fridges, and microwaves.
These guys flew from Missouri. They didn't land a single time. They dropped 30,000-pound bombs on a target the size of a washing machine and then got back home safely without ever landing in the Middle East or ever stopping other than to briefly refuel. And, of course, they did that in the air. So it's really an incredible operation, testament to the power of American military.
Operation Midnight Hammer has been in the works. Last week, Netanyahu asked the White House, how can we help? Trump said, clear the way for our bombers. The Israeli Air Force had a mission, eliminate as many Iranian air defense systems as possible. The Pentagon handed them a target list, and they went to work. The Iranians had no idea what was coming.
There was nobody speaking about this, any of the preparations. There was a complete lockdown, almost a blackout of information for the last few days. So that is a significant achievement because there were no leaks about the timing. If you looked at the moon schedule, you might have had a clue because it was a waning crescent and almost a new moon on the 25th. So it would have been very, very dark over Iran tonight.
Trump gave the final order on Marine One. Secretary Hegseth called him when he was leaving Bedminster Saturday and said, the B-2s are about to reach the point of no return. Are we a go? And the president said, it's a go. The administration was confident their intent was rock solid.
Are you saying there that the United States did not see intelligence that the Supreme Leader had ordered weaponization?
That's irrelevant. I see that question being asked in the media. That's an irrelevant question.
No,
they have
that is
everything
the
they
key
need to build
point
a
in
weapon.
U.S. intelligence assessments. You know
no,
that.
It's not.
Yes, it was.
No, it's
that
not.
The political decision had not
I know
been
that better
made.
than you know that, and I know that that's not the case.
But I'm asking you whether the order was given.
And the people who say that, it doesn't matter if the order was given. They have everything they need to build nuclear weapons. Why would you bury things in a mountain, 300 feet under the ground?
Right.
Why would you bury why do they have 60% enriched uranium? Why do they have a space program? Is Iran going to go to the moon? No.
47 flew back to Washington and oversaw the mission in the Situation Room. The president was joined by his national security team, Hegseth, Rubio, Gabbard, Ratcliffe, and the chairman of the Joint Chiefs. Originally, a set of B-2s flew west to Guam as a misdirection. The others continued east, each carrying bunker busters. A nuclear submarine in the Arabian Sea fired first. 24 Tomahawks that took out Iranian defense systems. Then the B-2s, flanked by F-22s, dropped 14 bunker busters onto 3 key targets. The main Iranian nuclear sites, which included the famous Fordow facility buried deep underneath the mountain. The U.S. commanders say all 14 bombs hit their targets, leaving nothing but smoking craters. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs, General Raisin Kane, said the targets sustained severe damage and destruction. Trump said they were obliterated and were awaiting additional damage assessment. As the bombers left Iranian airspace, U.S. Navy assets fired Tomahawks to suppress anti-aircraft fire. All the pilots landed safely back in Missouri on Sunday night. The president came out at 10 o'clock Saturday and called it a success.
Remember, there are many targets left. Tonight's was the most difficult of them all, by far, and perhaps the most lethal. But if peace does not come quickly, we will go after those other targets with precision, speed, and skill. Most of them can be taken out in a matter of minutes.
The ceasefire announcement is a strong signal that the short war is winding down. And we still have to wait and see what happens next. Iran's nuclear program has been set back years, possibly decades. Their top scientists and generals are all assassinated. Their leaders hiding in a bunker. And they're all alone in the world without proxies or allies. It could be too expensive for the Iranians to reconstitute their nuclear program. We don't know if they have other clandestine sites or whether they snuck enriched uranium out of the mountain before the attack, but there's no doubt the regime's been significantly crippled. The Trump administration appears to have pulled off an incredible operation, and the American military, who lost a little prestige under President Biden, is back in a big way. American deterrence is back. This sends a powerful message to China, Russia, and the cartels, and gives Trump even more power over trade negotiations. Other countries see that Trump is willing to go to the extreme for what he believes. The market's up and oil prices are down. We hope any future fallout can be contained and that American armed forces remain safe and the homeland is protected. Click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You won't get it anywhere else.
To remind you that 60% of sales on Amazon come from independent sellers, Tracy from Lily's of Charleston will watch 60 contestants eat 60 hot wings, all covered in Lily's hot sauce.
What's your face?
Good morning.
morning. Today, breaking news, an historic day for the United States, Israel, and the world. The U.S. bombs Iran. The commander-in-chief, President Donald Trump, authorizing the U.S. military to strike 3 of Iran's most lethal nuclear sites last night. We know of no human casualties, but Iran's nuclear infrastructure appears to be badly damaged in the biggest B-2 stealth bomber action we have ever seen, including obliterating Iran's most significant uranium-enriched Fordo site built underground in the mountains in Iran. Here's President Trump last night.
Tonight I can report to the world that the strikes were a spectacular military success. Iran's key nuclear enrichment facilities have been completely and totally obliterated. For 40 years, Iran has been saying death to America, death to Israel. But if peace does not come quickly, we will go after those other targets with precision, speed, and skill.
Joining me now in his first interview since the U.S. action is the Secretary of State of America, Secretary Marco Rubio. Mr. Secretary, thank you for being here. Are we now at war with Iran?
No, we're not. This is not a war against Iran. This is very simple. 67 days ago, the President of the United States sent the Iranians a letter, and it said, you're not going to have nuclear weapons. You're not going to have a militarized nuclear program. Let's negotiate. I want to do this diplomatically. I want to do this peacefully. They tried to play him along the way they've played every American president for the last 35 years. And, the president told them, if we don't get a deal, which is what he wanted, then he'll have to handle it differently. And that's what he did last night. He handled it differently. But that was an Iranian choice. We didn't make that choice. They did. By playing games with Donald Trump, they made a huge mistake. And President Trump acted last night. And I think the world today is safer and more stable than it was 24 hours ago. And a bunch of these countries putting out statements condemning us privately, they all agree with us that this needed to be done. They got to do what they got to do for, their own public relations purposes. But the only people in the world that are unhappy about what happened in Iran last night is the regime in Iran.
Have you heard from anyone in Iran, and are you expecting retaliation?
Well, if they retaliate, it'll be the worst mistake they've ever made. Look, we can fly in and out of Iran at will. We went in last night. The president sent our military forces from halfway across the world, went in, conducted this operation, left. Not a shot was fired against us. They didn't even know what had happened. By the time we left, the planes were out of their airspace before they finally started realizing they had been hit. So it would be a terrible mistake if Iran retaliates. But that's not our goal. We are not declaring war on Iran. We're not looking for war in Iran. But if they attack us, then I think we have capabilities they haven't even seen yet. It would be a terrible mistake on their part. And frankly, it's not what we hope for or wish. What we want now is to ensure that Iran never has nuclear weapons. If what they want is a civil nuclear program where they have power plants like a lot of other countries in the world have, they can do that. That's the deal that's been offered to them. They rejected it. They played us. They tried to play us, I should say. They wouldn't respond to our offers. They disappeared for 10 days. And now, the president had to take action as a response.
And the response included strategic ambiguity. Can you walk us through the plan in terms of how it was deceptive, not allowing the Iranians to understand what was really taking place?
Well, ultimately, when we do these things, it's because we care about the safety and security of our troops, of our airmen, and all those who are supporting these missions. So the element of surprise is important in military tactics. In this particular, now, I don't think the Iranians or anyone should have been under any mystery. The president said very clearly, we have 60 days to make progress on a deal, and if we don't, I'm going to deal with it differently. But in terms of what people call deception and surprise and things of this nature, the core of that is not the success. The mission was going to be successful no matter what. The core of that was protecting our servicemen and women who are in harm's way in conducting that mission. That's the most important part. And they went in, they did what they needed to do with precision and skill that no other military in the world can do, and they left. And they were well outside of Iranian airspace before the regime even realized what had happened. And that was the goal here, and that was achieved. These planes came from halfway across the world, and no one saw them coming. And that's a huge credit to Pete Hegseth and General Kane and General Kurilla and obviously our commander-in-chief for pulling that off.
Well, the president said in a post recently that he knows where the supreme leader is hiding, but that he was not ready to take him out yet. What can you tell us about your expectations with regard to regime change in Iran?
Well, that's certainly not the goal of what we're working on here. Their goal is stated very clearly in a letter the president sent the Supreme Leader about 65, 67 days ago. And in a letter he said, you're not going to have a nuclear weapon. Let's negotiate peacefully a solution. We can make a really good deal that's good for Iran, good for America, good for the world. If you don't, however, then I'm going to have to deal with this differently. The Iranians didn't like the letter. They didn't respond to it. They ultimately entered into fake negotiations and tried to play him along. In essence, they thought they could do with President Trump what they've done with presidents in the past and get away with it. And they found out last night that they can't. And the world found out last night that you can't. And that's important, not just on this issue, but for so many other issues happening around the world. I think that what we are seeing is that this is a president that he does it. And I think that to a lot of people, including the Iranian regime, is shocking.
What are your expectations in terms of Iran's nuclear capabilities today?
Well, they're certainly degraded. Look, at the end of the day, Iran is committed to becoming a nuclear weapons power. I do think it puts their regime at risk.
Explain, Jonathan.
Calls to impeach Trump. What's new?
Early, George Washington University law prof and Fox News contributor. I mean, that was a tough moment for old AOC there. The ceasefire, so we got to impeach Trump. Jonathan, let's go to the substance of this. The substance of this, because I know you have some history about ceasefire negotiations and a president involved and these kinds of things. But tell us what we should know.
Peace breaks out. It's sort of a Marissa Tomei moment from My Cousin Vinny. What a nightmare. And the problem is that it doesn't make for a very good impeachment, and that's why she was struggling. The other problem is that if this is impeachable, you can impeach a good number of presidents. Thomas Jefferson, who moved against the Barbary Pirates. You would also include Bill Clinton and Barack Obama. I mean, Obama in 2016 alone dropped over 26,000 bombs on countries ranging from Somalia to Syria to Afghanistan to Iraq. There was no suggestion by Democrats that they had to immediately impeach Barack Obama. The fact is that presidents have always claimed this authority to be able to commit troops and take military action. And yes, in my view, this is an act of war, but the way that courts and Congress have interpreted it is it is not something that requires a declaration. And keep in mind, we've only declared 11 wars in our history. We've had over 125 military operations, some going on for years, without such a declaration, including Vietnam and Korea.
Yeah, I think it's probably a good idea for Congress to have to weigh in on war, especially protracted conflicts and boots on the ground. But this obviously was, her point was ridiculous from the beginning. Now, we had another big win for President Trump today. I mean, he has lots of wins to talk about today. But this was the Supreme Court, at least temporarily, clearing the way for the White House to speed up these deportations and send illegals to countries where they have no previous ties. How important is this, Jonathan, tonight?
This is enormously important. It gives a great number of options now to the Trump administration. It should have the effect of speeding up deportations. This Boston judge actually said that he believed the Supreme Court and Congress were on his side. Well, obviously he was wrong about one of those by 6-3, because that's the result today. And the court said you can't send people to a country other than their home country. That is a major stumbling block for the administration. They have a lot of people to deport, but they also don't have cooperative countries often on the other side. This gives them options, and you can bet they're going to use it.
Yeah, and I think the Trump administration does not have the time to give the process that the left thinks every illegal alien is due. Most of them have already been given their own due process. But Jonathan, this is fascinating.
They have a process illegally coming in here, right? Do they have a process coming in?
Fox News alert, Trump says Iran and Israel have just agreed to a ceasefire, and he expects it to last forever. But it won't go into effect for 24 hours. He's going to let them each take one last shot at each other. Congratulations to everyone. It has been fully agreed by and between Israel and Iran that there will be a complete and total ceasefire in approximately 6 hours from now, when Israel and Iran have wound down and completed their in-progress final missions for 12 hours, at which point the war will be considered ended. Officially, Iran will start the ceasefire, and upon the 12th hour, ceasefire, and upon the 24th hour, an official day war will be saluted by the world. During each ceasefire, the other side will remain peaceful and respectful on the assumption that everything works as it should, which it will. I would like to congratulate both countries, Israel and Iran, on having the stamina, courage, and intelligence to end what would be called the 12-day war. This is a war that could have gone on and destroyed the entire Middle East, but it didn't and never will. J.D. Vance was just on with Brett.
This is a great thing. For Israel, think about this. They've accomplished an important military objective. They've helped us destroy the Iranian nuclear program. They've also destroyed the conventional missile capability of Iran that threatened the country of Israel. For the Iranians, I think this is a new opportunity to actually pursue the path of peace. As I said yesterday, what the Iranians have showed through their support of terror networks, through their now failed effort to build a nuclear weapon, is that they're just not very good at war. And I think the president really hit the reset button, produce long-term peace for the region. That's always been his goal. I actually think when we look back, we will say the 12-day war was an important reset moment for the entire region.
Reuters is also reporting that Iran has officially agreed to the terms of the ceasefire deal, just hours after they fired missiles at American military in Qatar and Iraq. Here's the launch. Watch. The president confirmed 14 Iranian rockets were fired, saying 13 were knocked down and one was set free because it was headed in a non-threatening direction. 47 also confirming there were no casualties and hardly any damage was done. Trump calls it a very weak response, but most importantly, they've gotten it all out of their system. And there will be, hopefully, no further hate. I want to thank Iran for giving us early notice, which made it possible for no lives to be lost and nobody to be injured. Thank you for your attention to this matter. So Trump got a heads up about the Iranian attack because the Iranians didn't want American casualties. Our response would have been devastating. But the regime also had to do something to save face, especially so they can show the Iranian people that they're still in charge. So far, the mission's been flawless. No American casualties. The bombs hit their targets. No real escalation so far, and no mission creep yet. Trump gave the Iranians a deadline and he gave peace a chance. But the president felt like the Ayatollah gave him the middle finger, figuratively, when he refused to meet him in Turkey for face-to-face talks. And that came with a price. When the clock struck midnight Friday, B-2 bombers took off on a 37-hour flight, but they were prepared. These stealth bombers have bathrooms, mini fridges, and microwaves.
These guys flew from Missouri. They didn't land a single time. They dropped 30,000-pound bombs on a target the size of a washing machine and then got back home safely without ever landing in the Middle East or ever stopping other than to briefly refuel. And of course, they did that in the air. So it's really an incredible operation, a testament to the power of American military.
Operation Midnight Hammer has been in the works. Last week, Netanyahu asked the White House, how can we help? Trump said, clear the way for our bombers. The Israeli Air Force had a mission, eliminate as many Iranian air defense systems as possible. The Pentagon handed them a target list, and they went to work. The Iranians had no idea what was coming.
There was nobody speaking about this, any of the preparations. There was a complete lockdown, almost a blackout of information for the last few days. That is a significant achievement because there were no leaks about the timing. If you looked at the moon schedule, you might have had a clue because it was a waning crescent and almost a new moon on the 25th.
over Iran tonight.
Trump gave the final order on Marine One. Secretary Hegseth called him when he was leaving Bedminster Saturday and said, the B-2s are about to reach the point of no return. Are we a go? And the president said, it's a go. The administration was confident their intelligence was rock solid.
Are you saying there that the United States did not see intelligence that the Supreme Leader had ordered weaponization?
That's irrelevant. I think that question being asked in the media, that's an irrelevant question.
No,
they have
that is
everything
the
they
key
need to build
point
a
in
weapon.
U.S. intelligence assessment. You know
No,
that.
it's not.
Yes, it was.
No, it's
that
not.
the political
I
decision
know,
had not
I know
been
that better
made.
than you know that, and I know that that's not the case.
But I'm asking you whether the order was
about.
given.
And the people who say that, it doesn't matter if the order was given. They have everything they need to build nuclear weapons. Why would you bury things in a mountain 300 feet under the ground?
Right.
Why would you bury why do they have 60% enriched uranium? Why do they have a space program?
47 flew back to Washington and oversaw the situation room. The president was joined by his national security team, Hegseth, Rubio, Gabbard, Ratcliffe, and the chairman of the Joint Chiefs. Originally, a set of B-2s flew west to Guam as a misdirection. The others continued, each carrying bunker busters. A nuclear submarine in the Arabian Sea fired first. 24 Tomahawks that took out Iranian defense systems. By F-22s dropped 14 bunker busters onto 3 key targets. The main Iranian nuclear
A ceasefire has been, quote, fully agreed to by Israel and Iran. There will be a complete and total ceasefire 6 hours from now. Again, this just happened. I don't want to spring this on you. And we're trying to figure out exactly what it means. It's a rather lengthy post on Truth Social. Again, we had been reporting, Clarissa and I were just discussing that there were warnings about strikes in Tehran. There have been strikes throughout the course of the day. What do you think this means?
Well, it follows exactly what I was saying. Trump is now clearly trying to transition from war maker to peacemaker, and he's used his considerable influence with Bibi Netanyahu. Let's remember the Israelis also did massive damage. I would argue the Israeli strikes were probably more significant in setting back the Iranian program than even the American strikes, because they got to 20 of the top scientists, 20 of the top military officials, degraded almost every facility, destroyed Iran's air defenses. So Israel feels like it can stop. Trump wants to move into a peacemaking role. He wants it to stop. The Iranians obviously have it's only good for them because they have not been able to.
Flights have been cancelled, as Mark Stone pointed out, as that airspace in Qatar has closed. These are live pictures. We don't actually have them, I'm afraid, folks. They're a scan of pictures available, though, and what it does show.
We are living in an age of information warfare, and it is war and diplomacy via Truth Social when it comes to Donald Trump. In the last few moments, the Commander-in-Chief, the US President, posted that Israel and Iran had agreed to a ceasefire. That happened about an hour ago. This is how it read. It was long. They said, congratulations to everyone. It's been fully agreed by Israel and Iran that there will be a complete and total ceasefire. It goes on and on to lay out a convoluted timeline. So the timeline is interesting. Ceasefire. That would mean at around 2 p.m. today, this is Australian time, Australian Eastern time, Iran and Israel would complete final missions. That is ominous. Then by 8 o'clock tonight, the ceasefire to officially begin for 12 hours. Following that, it would mean by 8 a.m. tomorrow, war would be considered over if the ceasefire holds. So there are a lot of caveats in that. It is convoluted, and we are waiting on official confirmation from both Iran and Israel on what the terms are. JD Vance was also on Fox News America. He was pretty positive about the move.
When I left the White House, I thought that we might be able to get it across the finish line before this broadcast, and it looks like the president has been able to do that. I mean, look, he's been working the phones constantly, frankly, before the 12-day war started, but certainly over the past 12 days, the president's been extremely clear about America's national objective here. It is to create a world where Iran cannot build a nuclear weapon.
We've yet to receive official confirmation, of course, on whether Israel or indeed Iran has accepted the terms of this ceasefire. Meantime, a fresh round of blasts have been heard across Tehran. CNN reporter Fred Pleitgen gave this update a short time ago.
The Iranians were shooting very intensely at something that was in the skies. We also tonight, again, Anderson, heard planes flying over the location that we're in, and then some pretty loud explosions to a location south of us. So that certainly seemed to indicate that there were Israeli jets in the air and that they were making several passes at whatever they were trying to bomb here in the fairly central part of the city. The Israelis, of course, had issued evacuation orders for 2 districts here in Tehran, and that was actually also exactly where we saw that tracer fire into the air coming from as well, where we heard those explosions also. And you alluded to the fact that it has already been a pretty intense day. There was one massive airstrike directly in the vicinity of where we are right now that really shook the buildings that we're in. We had to then take cover. When we emerged from our cover, the entire sky of the Iranian capital to the west of us was in thick black smoke. So that clearly a major strike that took place. Now, as far as that ceasefire is concerned, earlier, a senior Iranian official said that the Iranians had not gotten any sort of proposal about a ceasefire. They were not expecting one, they also said, and they were in fact saying that they were going to intensify their retaliatory strikes, of course, first and foremost, meaning against the Israelis for some of the airstrikes that we've been seeing here. We've not seen the situation quiet down since then, but certainly as of right now, there's no indication that the Iranians are expecting that a ceasefire is going to happen soon. But one thing that we certainly are seeing is that in this night, the Israelis seem to be ramping up their aerial campaign. The Iranians obviously ramping up their defense that they're trying to mount of that aerial campaign. And of course, you had those strikes against the LUD base, which the Iranians earlier today, this was on state media, but this was also official channels as well. They called it robust and successful. And one of the things that was a key line that the Iranians were putting out is that they were saying that on that base, they fired exactly as many missiles there as the Americans dropped on Iranian nuclear installations. Of course, that could indicate that that was a tit-for-tat response.
Yeah, so Fred Pleitgen, one of the only Western journalists in Tehran, so extraordinary access there and an extraordinary view of what is going on inside of Iran. Let's go to Tel Aviv now. Jonathan Conricus joins us. He's former IDF spokesperson. I believe you're still there. Jonathan, it's very early there. I really appreciate it. What is the latest information you have from the ground there in Israel? Has Benjamin Netanyahu agreed to the terms of the ceasefire as Trump has laid them out?
So good morning to you. As far as I'm aware, no, that has not yet happened. I think that the Israeli cabinet is deliberating exactly that topic, speaking, or they may have just concluded deliberating. And this is now an interesting time. That's politically, but militarily, I'll say a few things before that. We've had a relatively quiet night. The last time that we were in bomb shelters was several hours ago. There were 4 UAVs that were fired from Iran or dispatched from Iran that were intercepted outside of Israeli airspace. So Israelis have had an abnormally quiet night, which of course is always welcome. But at the political level, we're now at an interesting time because this may be the first time that we will see Israeli interests diverge from U.S. political directives. I think Israel believes and feels that there is still a lot of work that needs to be done against the IRGC, against their ballistic missiles, and against their ability to continue to fund and arm terror organizations. But now the U.S. is saying that there's a ceasefire, so we'll see how this is, what the middle ground can be for Israel.
Okay, so what is the objective here? What is the wish list if the US was to acquiesce fully to it? Is it regime change? Is it the killing of the Ayatollah? What else is on that list?
Yeah, I think, regime change has been spoken about a lot. It was never an official Israeli goal, and Israel hasn't really done things to put it into effect directly, but I think it is something of a hope that Israel will be able to live without an enemy country, with a regime that appears to be fixated and just consumed by hatred towards Israel and really hell-bent on Israel's destruction. So it is a big deal here. Yes, the nuclear infrastructure and the weapons program was number one and paramount, but I think Israel wants to achieve long-term change for the better. There's many things to say about so-called regime change. I think it's evident and very clear that it can only happen by the Iranian